Hi guys. Tonight we are stepping into a winter that does not knock politely. It presses down from the sky, settles into your bones, and refuses to leave. You stand outside as snow squeaks underfoot. That dry sound that only comes when the cold has already won. Wind slips through wool and leather as if they are suggestions, not barriers. Somewhere nearby, the ground itself feels warmer than the air. You probably won't survive this if you insist on staying upright and exposed. Because medieval winter is not a season, it is a siege. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights and stay exactly where you are, because you are about to lower yourself into the earth, the way thousands of families once did when winter arrived with no intention of mercy. You feel it first in your feet. The cold drains upward through leather soles, numbing toes, stiffening joints. Above ground, everything leaks heat. Wind steals it. Stone gives it away. Even thick timber sighs and exhales warmth into the dark. Down below, though, the earth holds on to what it has. You kneel, press a bare palm to frozen soil, and notice something strange. It is not biting back the way the air does. It is quiet, patient, waiting. This is not a dramatic choice. It is a practical one. One mainstream fact stands firm across medieval Europe. Soil acts as insulation. A layer of earth buffers temperature, slowing heat loss in winter and heat gain in summer. You do not need equations to understand this. You feel it the moment your shoulders dip below ground level. The wind fades. The noise softens. Your breath stops steaming quite so violently. You start digging because there is no romance left in freezing. The hole grows wider, then deeper. Your hands ache. Your back complains. Winter preparation is not a single heroic afternoon. It is weeks of labor while daylight shrinks. Historians often describe this as a seasonal rhythm rather than a desperate last resort, because families expected to modify how they lived as cold approached. The ground was not an emergency shelter. It was part of the calendar. There is a quirky detail that always surprises people. In some regions, especially across parts of northern and eastern Europe, families reused older pits year after year, carefully relining them with timber or wattle. These were not random holes. They were inherited spaces. The winter home your hands shape now may have sheltered your grandparents. That knowledge steadies you as much as the warmth does. You lower yourself fully inside. The ceiling is low. The walls curve slightly inward. This is not a basement under a house. It is the house. Semi-subterranean living, half buried and half built, was common enough that archaeologists still find the scars it left in the soil. These sunken dwellings reduce the surface area exposed to cold air, a small advantage that matters when survival balances on degrees. You listen. Above you, the wind still howls. Down here, it becomes a distant suggestion. Sound travels differently through packed earth. Storms feel muffled, as if wrapped in cloth. The silence is not empty. It is heavy, comforting, the kind that lets your shoulders drop for the first time in days. There is smoke, of course. Fire is life, and life produces byproducts. In many underground or semi-buried homes, smoke from the hearth did not rush eagerly outside. It lingered, pooling near the ceiling, seeping slowly through vents or thatch. Your eyes sting faintly. Your clothes absorb the smell. This is the price of warmth. A fringe detail from period accounts hints that people grew so accustomed to smoky air that clear winter air outside felt sharp and unpleasant by comparison. Imagine preferring smoke to windburn. You sit near the hearth. The heat is uneven, but it is real. Fire warms bodies, but earth warms space. That distinction matters. You feel warmth settle instead of racing upward and away. The ground cradles it, refusing to let go too quickly. This is why you are here. Historians still argue whether underground living was primarily driven by climate or by economic necessity. Some suggest poorer families had fewer materials for above-ground insulation, making earth the cheapest solution. Others point out that even communities with access to timber chose semi-subterranean designs in particularly harsh winters. You feel that debate quietly as you rub your hands together. Cold does not care about your income. It only cares about exposure. You notice another shift. Your breathing slows. The frantic edge dulls. Above ground, cold keeps you alert in the worst way. It sharpens fear. Down here, you can rest. That may be the most important survival factor of all. Exhaustion kills as efficiently as frostbite. And medieval winters were long. Sleep mattered. The ceiling presses close. You have to stoop. This is not claustrophobia so much as containment. Space shrinks because heat expands. Smaller rooms are easier to warm. Families crowd together not out of affection alone, but because bodies radiate warmth. You feel another presence nearby. A shoulder. A knee. The shared heat of survival. There is a faint dampness in the air. Earth breathes moisture. You smell it. That deep mineral scent. Moisture is both ally and threat. It keeps the air from becoming painfully dry. But it invites mold and rot if unmanaged. Medieval families knew this intimately. Even if they did not use the word mold the way you do. They aired spaces when weather allowed. They burned herbs. They scraped walls. Small acts of control in an environment that rarely offered any. Above you, snow piles higher. You know this because sound changes again. Footsteps vanish. The world grows quieter. Underground. You are no longer fighting winter directly. You are letting the planet do some of the work. There is a quiet, almost humorous realization that sneaks in as you sit there. The ground does not care who you are. Lord or peasant. Young or old. The earth offers the same insulation to everyone. In that sense, underground living is radically equal. Later, castles will loom above frozen landscapes. Their stone halls colder than the pits below. Remember that contrast. We will come back to it. For now, you focus on the present. Your fingers regain feeling. Your breath steadies. The winter outside still rages. But it feels farther away, as if you have stepped sideways out of its reach. You did not defeat the cold. You simply moved where it has less power. This is the first lesson the earth teaches you. Survival is not always about standing firm. Sometimes it is about lowering yourself, listening, and letting gravity help. You lean back against packed soil, feel its steady coolness, and understand why medieval families chose this path again and again when winter pressed downward with no intention of stopping. You stay where you are, because once you have felt the difference, it is hard to imagine choosing otherwise. The earth around you does not feel warm in the way fire does. It does not glow or flicker. Instead, it behaves like a stubborn guardian, slowing every attempt the cold makes to reach you. This is the quiet, secret medieval families relied on, even if they never explained it in scientific terms. Soil resists change. It remembers yesterday's warmth and releases it reluctantly. Above ground, winter works quickly. Wind strips heat from walls. Frost creeps into cracks. But down here, temperature changes move at a glacial pace. One widely accepted historical fact is that underground and semi-subterranean spaces maintain a more stable temperature year-round, often hovering just above freezing, even during brutal cold spells. That difference, small as it sounds, is the line between shivering constantly and surviving with dignity. You press your palm against the wall again. The soil feels cool, but not cruel. It does not stab your skin the way frozen air does. It absorbs your body heat slowly, spreading it outward rather than snatching it away. This is insulation without effort. No weaving, no quarrying, just gravity and depth doing their work. The smell down here is distinct. Earth. Smoke. Old wood. Damp straw. It settles into your clothes and hair. People of the time likely smelled like this for months on end. A quirky detail from later travelers' accounts mentions that winter villagers carried the scent of soil with them even outdoors. A smell outsiders found unsettling, but locals barely noticed. Scent becomes part of identity when you live half inside the ground. You adjust the bedding beneath you. Straw, reeds, maybe dried leaves. Nothing luxurious, but everything chosen for its ability to trap air. Insulation is not only in walls, it is in layers. You pile what you can between your body and the floor, because even friendly earth can draw warmth away if you lie directly against it too long. Historians still debate how intentional medieval insulation strategies truly were. Some argue families understood these principles instinctively, learned through generations of trial and error. Others suggest survival practices spread through imitation rather than understanding. You copy what worked for your neighbors because they lived through last winter. That is reason enough. You listen again. The silence feels thick, padded. Snow absorbs sound above you. Earth absorbs it below. Between the two, noise has nowhere to travel. Storms become distant murmurs. This silence has a psychological effect. Fear softens. Time stretches. Nights feel longer but less frantic. That matters when darkness lasts 16 hours and there is nowhere else to go. There is a faint drip somewhere. Moisture from breath, from soil, from life itself. Underground warmth is always negotiated. Too dry and throats ache. Too damp and sickness creeps in. Medieval families learned to manage this balance with remarkable sensitivity. They repositioned fires, opened vents briefly during calmer weather, hung fabrics where condensation formed. Small, careful adjustments that made the difference between endurance and misery. You shift closer to the hearth. Firelight dances against earthen walls, throwing shadows that feel closer than shadows above ground ever do. The space responds to light differently. There are no long corridors for darkness to hide in. Everything is immediate. This closeness breeds awareness. You know where everyone is. You hear every movement. Privacy is sacrificed for warmth. There is a fringe tidbit that tends to surprise modern listeners. In some regions, families deliberately plastered earthen walls with mixtures that included straw, clay, and sometimes even animal dung. Not because they enjoyed the idea, but because these mixtures sealed cracks and added insulation. Dung, when dried and mixed properly, reduces airflow and retains heat. It smells far less than you expect once cured. Remember this detail. It will echo later when we talk about livestock sharing living space. You breathe slowly. Smoke curls upward, then spreads, trapped beneath the low ceiling. Your eyes water briefly. This is not comfortable in a modern sense, but it is survivable. Smoke keeps insects away, dries the air slightly, and carries heat across the room. Chimneys will come later. For now, smoke is part of the system. Historians still argue whether underground living significantly reduced winter mortality or merely delayed it. Records are incomplete. Parish deaths spike in cold months regardless of housing type. Yet personal letters and settlement patterns suggest families actively sought underground shelter during the worst winters. You do not need statistics to understand why. You feel safer here. That feeling alone is powerful. The earth above you presses down with weight measured in tons. Strangely, this pressure comforts rather than frightens. It seals you off from wind, from drifting snow, from sudden temperature drops. You imagine the ground like a thick blanket pulled over the village, heavy but protective. You stretch your legs. Space is limited, but manageable. Everything here serves a purpose. There is no room for excess. This simplicity sharpens attention. You notice how warmth pools near the center of the room and fades toward corners. You learn where to sit, where to sleep, where not to linger too long. Time passes differently underground. Without windows, light becomes ritual. Fire signals evening. Embers signal night. You begin to measure hours by temperature changes rather than clocks. When the air cools slightly, someone feeds the fire. When it warms too much, someone shifts bedding. This constant micro-adjustment keeps the environment stable. You think briefly of above-ground houses, tall walls, drafty doors, roofs rattling under snow. Romantic in illustration, brutal in reality. Earth does not rattle, it absorbs. This is the second lesson the ground offers you. Stability matters more than comfort. Warmth does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be steady. Medieval families understood this deeply. Even if they never put it into words, they trusted the earth to do what air could not. You settle again, letting your back rest against soil that has not seen daylight in years. It feels ancient, patient, reliable. Winter continues its assault above. But down here, the earth slows it to a crawl. You are not warm. You are warm enough. And in medieval winter, that difference is everything. You begin to notice something subtle as the days blur together beneath the soil. This place does not feel new. It feels remembered, as if the ground itself has hosted lives before yours and quietly expects more to come. The idea is oddly comforting. You are not inventing survival from scratch. You are stepping into a pattern worn smooth by centuries of repetition. Long before medieval winters earned their reputation, people had already learned a simple truth through experience. Digging down works. Evidence scattered across Europe shows shallow pit dwellings appearing again and again across vastly different eras. From early Iron Age settlements to late medieval villages, the shape returns with minor adjustments, not because of nostalgia, but because it functioned when nothing else did. You run your fingers along the wall and imagine earlier hands doing the same. Generations before you pressed clay into cracks, replaced rotting posts, packed soil tighter each winter. The knowledge was not written down in manuals. It traveled through memory, through watching, through the unspoken rule that when the cold deepens, you follow what endured last year. There is a strange continuity here. The earth does not care which century you belong to. It offers the same protection now as it did to someone crouched here 500 years earlier. That realization settles slowly, like warmth seeping into your bones. Some archaeologists suggest these underground choices were less about innovation and more about remembering older ways of living. When above-ground houses failed under extreme cold, communities did not invent solutions. They returned to them. You feel that pull now. The instinct to lower yourself, to reduce exposure, to trust gravity rather than fight it. You shift your weight, and the packed floor creaks faintly. Wood beams overhead support soil, not sky. The difference matters. Snow piling above does not strain the structure the way it would a roof. Weight presses evenly, stabilizing rather than threatening collapse. This design appears again and again in excavated sites, suggesting it was not accidental. There is an odd detail that surfaces when you look closely at these older dwellings. Many were not fully underground, but sunk just enough to take advantage of thermal stability while still allowing light and smoke to escape. This half measure feels deliberate, a compromise between darkness and warmth. You are not hiding underground. You are nesting within it. You picture earlier winters, perhaps harsher than this one. The so-called medieval warm period did not erase cold seasons. Winters still bit hard, especially in northern regions. When weather patterns shifted unpredictably, people leaned on solutions that did not depend on forests staying intact or stone being affordable. Earth was always available. There is no full agreement among historians on whether these designs spread through migration or independent rediscovery. Did families copy neighbors? Or did necessity push them toward the same conclusions again and again? Sitting here, the answer feels irrelevant. When cold strips options away, solutions converge. You adjust the fire again. Embers glow softly. Light reflects off curved walls, giving the room a rounded, almost womb-like feel. This shape is not coincidence. Corners leak heat. Curves hold it. Even if medieval builders never articulated that principle, their homes quietly followed it. You feel time stretch. Outside, daylight comes and goes without your direct awareness. Underground, the rhythm changes. Morning is marked by colder air before the fire wakes fully. Evening arrives as warmth settles deeper into the room. Your body begins to sync with this slower cycle. There is a quiet psychological shift that happens when you live like this. Above ground, winter feels aggressive. Down here, it feels distant. Present, yes, but less personal. The earth absorbs the season's anger, leaving you with its residue rather than its full force. Some scholars point out that these older dwelling styles often reappeared during periods of crisis. Harsh winters, crop failures, population pressure. When resources thinned, people simplified. Underground living stripped life back to essentials. Shelter, heat, proximity. You become acutely aware of sound. Every movement is amplified in the small space. A cough, a shift of straw, the crackle of fire. This constant awareness pulls people closer emotionally as well as physically. Isolation is impossible here. Loneliness has little room to grow. A lesser-known detail emerges from site studies in colder regions. Some underground homes were deliberately placed near slopes or embankments, allowing one wall to remain exposed while others were buried. This allowed drainage, light, and controlled airflow while still benefiting from insulation. It is an elegant solution, born from observation rather than theory. You imagine someone standing on that slope centuries ago, judging where snow drifts least, where meltwater runs, where wind hits hardest. Survival depended on reading the landscape correctly. Mistakes were costly. The question of choice lingers. Were families forced into the ground? Or did they willingly return there? The answer seems to change depending on region and period. In some places, underground living was seasonal, abandoned when warmth returned. In others, it became semi-permanent, blending with above-ground structures over time. You feel the humility of that decision. To live partly buried is to accept limits, to stop trying to dominate the environment and instead tuck yourself into it. Medieval life rarely allowed illusions of control. Winter stripped them away quickly. The fire pops softly. Smoke thickens, then thins as it finds its slow exit. You breathe carefully. Used to this now, your body adapts faster than your mind expects. You realize something else. These spaces did more than keep people alive. They preserved stories. Oral traditions flourished in close quarters. Long nights demanded conversation, memory, repetition. Underground rooms became containers not just of warmth, but of history itself. You picture children listening wide-eyed as elders spoke, shadows dancing across earthen walls, stories carried through winters because there was nowhere else for them to go. The ground held voices as well as heat. This is the third lesson the earth offers you. Survival is not only physical, it is cultural. By returning underground, medieval families tapped into older rhythms, older knowledge, and older ways of staying human. When the world above froze hard, you settled deeper into the space, feeling the weight of time press gently along with the soil. Winter remains relentless outside. Down here, endurance feels possible. Not comfortable, not easy, but steady, and in a season defined by extremes. Steadiness is everything. You become aware of the failure above you before you ever name it. It arrives as a draft along the back of your neck when you climb out briefly, as a shiver that snaps your teeth together before you even finish inhaling. Above ground, winter does not need permission. It slips through joints, knots, seams, places builders hoped no one would notice. Wood shrinks, stone sweats cold, doors warp. Every surface becomes an invitation for heat to leave. You stand inside an ordinary surface house and feel how quickly warmth escapes. Fire flares brightly, then vanishes upward, pulled toward the roof like it is trying to flee. Wind presses against walls and finds answers everywhere. You do not need to be told this fails. Your body tells you immediately. Accounts from cold seasons repeatedly describe homes that could not hold heat no matter how fiercely fires were fed. Wood burned faster. Smoke thickened. Yet the air near the floor stayed cruelly cold. It is why people slept sitting up, crouched close to embers, wrapped like bundles rather than stretched out. Height became a liability. Space worked against you. You step back underground and feel the difference again. The contrast is so sharp it almost feels unfair. Here, nothing rushes. Heat lingers. Cold arrives slowly, like a guest who knows it is unwelcome. Above-ground houses tried to fight winter. Underground homes avoided the fight entirely. You realize how much effort surface living demanded. Constant tending of fires, endless patching of gaps, hanging fabric over doorways, stuffing moss into cracks. These were not improvements. They were defenses. And defenses fail eventually. There is a small but telling detail that appears in winter records. People often complained less about cold when they wrote from buried or semi-buried dwellings. Complaints shifted instead to smoke, dampness, and crowding. That shift matters. Cold was no longer the primary enemy. It had been demoted. You imagine a timber house on an open plain. Snow piles against walls, then melts slightly, refreezes. Pries boards apart. Wind scours the structure night after night. Inside, firelight flickers uselessly against tall ceilings. The building works hardest where winter works hardest too. That is not a fair contest. Underground spaces change the rules. Wind loses its leverage. Snow becomes insulation rather than threat. Temperature swings soften. You feel the difference in your breathing, in how your muscles unclench. Some observers suggest medieval builders understood failure very well. They knew when something did not work. Progress was not about novelty. It was about abandoning ideas that killed people. When above-ground housing could not be made warm enough with available materials, people chose not to force it. You crouch and feel how the ceiling presses closer here. It feels intentional now. A low ceiling traps heat near bodies. Warm air cannot rise far before it is redirected. Smoke spreads. Yes. But so does warmth. The trade-off is accepted. There is an odd irony in this. Structures meant to display power and permanence often performed worst in winter. Stone halls impressed visitors but punished occupants. Cold stone leached heat relentlessly. Fires roared yet failed. You will remember this later when castles enter the picture. For now, you stay focused on failure as teacher. Above ground, failure was loud. Doors rattled. Roofs groaned. Inside, people shivered despite effort. Underground, failure was quieter. Damp crept slowly. Smoke lingered. These problems could be managed. Cold could not. You listen to the wind again, muffled by layers of soil. The sound no longer carries menace. It becomes background noise. This matters more than comfort alone. Fear consumes energy. Calm conserves it. Winter survival is as much about managing exhaustion as temperature. There is a curious behavioral change that comes with this shift. People spent less time standing once underground. They sat, reclined, rested. Heat conservation favored stillness. Above ground, movement kept blood flowing against cold. Down here, stillness preserved warmth. Some scholars note that winter injuries decreased in settlements where underground living was common, not because life was easier, but because people moved less in dangerous conditions. Ice outside broke bones. Darkness hid hazards. Staying below reduced exposure. You adjust your position and feel straw compress beneath you. The floor is not warm, but it is consistent. No sudden cold shocks. No icy drafts. Consistency becomes the new comfort. You remember earlier winters spent fighting the cold, chasing warmth that never stayed put. The earth changes that dynamic. Warmth no longer needs chasing. It waits where you leave it. A rarely mentioned detail emerges from descriptions of these spaces. Many underground homes were deliberately darkened beyond necessity. Light leaks meant heat leaks. Families learned to tolerate gloom because it brought warmth. Your eyes adjust slowly. Shadows soften. Darkness becomes familiar rather than frightening. The failure of above-ground homes also reshaped social behavior. People abandoned unused rooms. Entire floors went dark for months. Space collapsed inward. Underground living simply formalized what winter already demanded. You notice how the fire behaves differently here. Flames burn lower, slower. They do not need to roar to be effective. Fuel lasts longer. Wood consumption drops. In a world where gathering firewood meant labor and risk, this mattered enormously. The ground makes efficiency possible. There is still disagreement about whether underground living spread primarily through necessity or cultural preference. Some argue people valued the sense of protection and continuity. Others insist cold left no alternative. Sitting here, wrapped in quiet warmth, you suspect both are true. Choice and compulsion often overlap. What begins as survival becomes tradition. What begins as memory becomes architecture. You lean back and listen to nothing. Not the wind. Not the creak of timber. Not the groan of stone. Just the soft breathing of people sharing space. The earth absorbs everything else. This is the fourth lesson winter teaches you. Not all shelters fail in the same way. The ones that fail quietly give you time to adapt. The ones that fail loudly demand energy you cannot spare. Underground living was not primitive stubbornness. It was a rational response to repeated evidence. When cold attacked from all sides, families chose the one direction where it weakened. You close your eyes briefly. Above, winter continues its assault on walls and roofs and pride. Down here, it presses harmlessly against soil and stops. And that is enough. You wake before dawn, not because light reaches you, but because your body senses the cold shifting again. Winter preparation is never finished. It is a cycle of adjustment, repetition, and quiet labor. Digging was only the beginning. The real work unfolds slowly, day after day, as you turn an empty hollow into a place that can hold life through months of frost. You remember the ache in your shoulders from the first days, spades biting into frozen soil, fingers stiffening as soon as gloves came off. This was not casual effort. Digging demanded timing. Too early, and rain collapsed walls. Too late, and frost hardened the ground beyond reason. Villagers watched the seasons carefully, choosing the narrow window when soil was firm but still willing. Surviving winters required more than strength. It required planning. Remains found at medieval sites show that many underground homes were dug gradually, expanded year by year rather than carved all at once. This was not impatience. It was caution. People learned how the earth behaved before trusting it fully. Walls were tested through storms. Roofs were reinforced after heavy snow. Survival favored those who moved slowly enough to learn. You scrape at a wall now, smoothing loose soil, packing it tighter with the flat of your hand. This motion is instinctive. Compacting earth strengthens it, reduces air gaps, and limits drafts. It also feels grounding, both literally and mentally. Your breathing slows. Your focus narrows. Work becomes rhythm. There is a small detail that often gets overlooked. Many families dug with the expectation of collapse. Temporary cave-ins were normal. Walls slumped. Roof supports bowed. Digging underground was not about perfection. It was about resilience. You rebuild what fails. You learn where the soil holds and where it slides. Children helped too. Not with heavy digging, but with carrying soil away, fetching water, pressing straw into plaster. Winter preparation involved everyone who could move. This shared labor-shaped family roles early. You learn survival by doing, not by being told. You notice how tools matter here. Iron spades cut differently than wooden ones. Picks break frozen clods more efficiently. Simple wedges brace beams. None of this equipment is impressive on its own. What matters is how well it fits the task. Medieval technology was often dismissed as crude, yet it was refined through relentless use. Some researchers believe underground homes encouraged tool specialization within villages. Certain people became known for digging, others for reinforcing, others for sealing walls. Skills clustered where mistakes had consequences. A poorly packed wall meant a colder night. A weak beam meant collapse. You adjust a support post, pressing it deeper into the floor. Wood and earth work together. Timber provides shape. Soil provides stability. Neither alone would suffice. This partnership appears repeatedly in excavated sites, suggesting people understood material limits even without formal training. There is a quietly strange habit associated with digging these spaces. In some regions, families buried small objects in walls or floors during construction. Not valuables, but tokens. A worn tool fragment. A carved mark. Something symbolic. These were not offerings in a religious sense so much as gestures of presence. Marks that said, "We were here, and we intend to stay." You feel the weight of that intention as you work. Digging underground is a commitment. It ties you to a place more firmly than a surface house ever could. Leaving becomes harder. Returning feels necessary. As the space takes shape, you become aware of airflow, even underground. Air must move. Small vents are carved carefully, angled to discourage wind while allowing smoke to escape. These openings are narrow, easily missed, yet vital. Without them, warmth becomes suffocating. With them, it becomes livable. There is no agreement among experts about how much medieval families consciously understood ventilation physics. What is clear is that they observed outcomes. Spaces that made people dizzy were altered. Spaces that felt breathable were copied. Knowledge spread through survival, not instruction. You pause, stretching your back. Digging compresses the body inward. It pulls attention down, toward ground and hands. This physical posture mirrors the mental one. Underground living requires humility. You adapt to the earth rather than reshaping it entirely. Food becomes part of preparation too. You carve niches into walls for storage. Roots, dried meat, grain. Underground temperatures slow spoilage. Not cold enough to freeze solid. Not warm enough to rot quickly. This balance turns soil into preservation. You smell damp grain, earthy vegetables. Winter food smells different, heavier, more restrained. There is an odd comfort in knowing where everything is. Space is limited, but order emerges naturally. Every item has a place because clutter blocks movement and traps moisture. Minimalism is not a philosophy here. It is necessity. You hear laughter briefly. Digging invites shared stories. Complaints. Jokes about aching joints. Humor lightens labor. In winter cultures, laughter often accompanies the hardest work. It does not deny difficulty. It makes it bearable. A subtle shift happens once digging ends and living begins. The space stops feeling like a project and starts feeling like shelter. The smell changes. Smoke layers in. Warmth lingers longer. Your body recognizes safety before your mind fully does. There is still uncertainty. Walls may slump. Damp may worsen. Smoke may thicken. Yet underground living offers something rare in winter. Control. Limited. Imperfect control. But enough to matter. Some historians suggest that the act of digging itself carried psychological weight. Lowering into the earth symbolized endurance. It was not retreat. It was preparation. People who dug believed in tomorrow, even when winter made tomorrow feel abstract. You lean against the wall and rest. Your hands are sore, your nails rimmed with soil. Yet the space holds. Quietly, patiently. This is the fifth lesson winter teaches you. Survival is built, not found. It comes from repeated effort, shared labor, and a willingness to work with what you cannot change. The ground will not warm itself for you, but if you listen, if you shape carefully, if you return again and again, it will meet you halfway. You sit back, letting the warmth settle into muscles that earned it. Outside, winter sharpens its teeth. Down here, preparation turns into protection, and for the first time since the cold arrived, you believe you might last. You start to understand that living underground does not mean disappearing completely. It means choosing how much of yourself remains exposed. The home around you is not a cave carved in secrecy. It is a compromise, carefully balanced between earth and air, half buried, half built, enough ground to hold warmth, enough structure to keep life functional. You stand near the entrance and feel the difference immediately. Cold brushes your face where the wall rises above ground, below your waist. The chill fades. This line, invisible but unmistakable, marks the boundary where winter loses strength. Medieval builders paid close attention to that boundary. They learned where cold struck hardest and buried those parts first. The design reveals itself slowly. Walls dug into slopes, roofs angled just enough to shed snow, openings placed where wind rarely blows directly. Nothing about this feels accidental. These homes are shaped by observation, not theory. Every decision answers a problem winter posed the year before. You step fully inside and notice how the structure breathes. Timber frames hold soil in place. Earth presses back, stabilizing the wood. This partnership creates a shell that flexes slightly rather than cracking. When frost shifts the ground above, the house moves with it instead of resisting. That flexibility saves lives. There is a detail you might miss if you were not paying attention. The floors slope gently toward one side. Meltwater needs somewhere to go. Drainage matters underground. A flat floor invites rot. A slight incline channels moisture away, protecting bedding and food. You feel it underfoot without seeing it. Some remains uncovered by archaeologists show repeated floor rebuilding over decades. Families resurfaced, packed earth with clay, ash, and straw, layering history under their feet. Each winter added another thin record of survival. You walk on those layers now, feeling their firmness. You notice the ceiling again. Low, but not oppressive. Its height is deliberate. Too low and smoke overwhelms. Too high and heat escapes. Builders learned this through failure. Ceilings collapsed. Smoke choked. Adjustments followed. Over time, an optimal height emerged, passed down without measurement. The light enters reluctantly. A narrow opening allows daylight to slide across the floor for a brief window each day. It never reaches the corners. Darkness settles early here, but not completely. Fire fills the gaps. Light flickers where the sun cannot. This arrangement changes how you move. You crouch naturally. You sit more than you stand. Bodies adapt to space, and space adapts to bodies. Winter demands efficiency. Movement costs heat. Stillness preserves it. There is a small, almost amusing detail tucked into some of these designs. In certain regions, builders intentionally left one wall thinner than the others, not out of laziness, but foresight. That wall could be broken through more easily in spring, expanding the home upward when warmth returned. Seasonal architecture, flexible rather than fixed. The question of permanence lingers. Were these homes meant to last generations or just winters? Evidence suggests both. Some were rebuilt annually. Others endured decades with careful maintenance. The distinction often depended on climate stability. Where winters were predictable, homes became semi-permanent. Where weather shifted wildly, flexibility mattered more. You settle near the hearth again and feel how the design funnels warmth inward. The room behaves like a bowl, collecting heat at its center, even when the fire burns low. Residual warmth clings to walls and floor. This lingering heat is what keeps you alive through long nights. A rarely discussed aspect of these homes is sound. Underground rooms carry voices differently. Words soften. Echo disappears. Conversations feel intimate, even when spoken quietly. This acoustic closeness pulls people together emotionally as well as physically. You imagine winter evenings spent here, stories told slowly, repairs made by firelight, children tracing patterns in dirt walls. Life does not stop underground. It compresses. Some observers suggest these semi-subterranean designs also offered protection beyond cold. Wind-driven snow could not bury entrances as easily when they were cut into slopes. Predators, human or otherwise, approached unseen less often. The earth hid movement, making homes harder to spot in blizzards. There is no consensus on whether defense was a primary concern. What is clear is that underground homes felt safer. That feeling changes behavior. People sleep more deeply. They conserve energy. Fear recedes just enough to allow rest. You touch the wall again. It feels firm, cool, reassuring. The earth does not shift suddenly. It does not surprise you. Above ground, winter feels aggressive because it changes constantly. Down here, conditions remain stable for hours at a time. That stability allows planning. You think briefly of above-ground houses with their rigid forms, straight walls, sharp corners. Winter exploits rigidity. Earth rewards adaptability. Semi-subterranean homes embody that lesson. There is an understated elegance to this design, not beautiful in a decorative sense, but efficient. Every feature answers a need. Nothing exists for show. Even the entrance is modest. Angled to reduce wind. Narrow to limit heat loss. Some historians suggest these homes represent a middle path between nomadic shelters and permanent architecture. They borrow from both worlds, temporary enough to adapt, solid enough to endure. That balance suits winter perfectly. You lean back and listen. The fire murmurs. Someone shifts straw nearby. Outside, snow slides from the roof with a muted thud. The sound reaches you softened, as if filtered through memory. This is the sixth lesson the ground teaches you. Survival often lives in the middle, not fully exposed, not fully hidden, balanced between shelter and connection. You do not disappear underground. You root yourself there. Winter continues to press above, but it presses against soil and timber that were shaped specifically to meet it. The design holds, quietly, reliably. You breathe in smoke and earth and warmth. This space, half buried and half built, becomes more than shelter. It becomes proof that adaptation does not need to be dramatic. It only needs to be precise. And as night deepens, you realize something comforting. The ground is no longer just beneath you. It is around you. You notice it most when you stop moving. When the fire settles into a low, steady glow, and everyone grows quiet. The air above you feels heavier than it should. Smoke does not rush away here. It gathers. It drifts. It lingers close. As if reluctant to leave the warmth it helped create. This is the trade you make underground. Heat stays. So does everything that rides with it. Your eyes adjust before your lungs do. A faint sting reminds you to blink more often. The ceiling carries a darkened sheen where smoke has kissed it night after night. This is familiar to everyone here. Smoke is not a surprise. It is a resident. In many winter homes like this, there was no true chimney as you imagine one. Instead, smoke found its own slow paths outward, seeping through vents, gaps, and porous roofing. It was inefficient by modern standards, but it served a purpose. Smoke spreads warmth before it escapes. It wraps the room, pressing heat downward instead of letting it vanish straight up. You breathe shallowly at first, then deeper as your body adjusts. This air is imperfect, but survivable. People learn to live with it, to read its density the way you read weather. Thick smoke means the fire needs attention. Clearer air means heat may be slipping away too fast. There is an understated benefit to this smoky environment. Insects avoid it. Mice hesitate. Mold grows more slowly where fires burn regularly. Smoke preserves as much as it irritates. Winter demands compromises, and this one is accepted quietly. You rub your eyes and smile faintly at a memory. The smell of smoke seeps into everything. Hair, wool, wood. By spring, people carried it with them, even outdoors. It marked winter survivors the way sunburn marked summer laborers. A scent of endurance. Some records hint that children grew so accustomed to smoky air that fresh winter wind made them cough violently. Clean air felt harsh. Smoke felt familiar. Comfort shifts depending on what keeps you alive. You notice how the fire is built low rather than tall. Flames lick sideways as much as upward, encouraging heat to spread across the floor before rising. This technique appears repeatedly in cold climate hearth designs. Not dramatic, just effective. There is no universal agreement on how dangerous this air truly was. Some suggest prolonged smoke exposure shortened lives. Others argue the warmth it provided outweighed those risks, especially when winters were unforgiving. Sitting here, eyes watering gently, you understand why the balance tipped toward warmth. You shift position and notice something else. Smoke carries sound, voices feel closer, words soften, the room feels smaller, more intimate, conversations slow. People speak less, listen more. Winter reshapes social rhythm as much as architecture. At night, smoke becomes a ceiling of warmth. It traps heat low, where bodies need it. People sleep close to the ground, wrapped tightly, breathing air that smells of fire and earth. Sleep comes easier when cold is kept at bay. Even if breathing requires adjustment, you hear a faint cough from someone nearby. It does not alarm anyone. It is expected. Someone shifts the fire slightly, opening a vent just enough to clear the air without losing too much warmth. These small interventions happen constantly. Living underground requires attention, but not panic. There is a curious detail hidden in some winter practices. Herbs were sometimes burned deliberately, not just for scent, but because people believed certain plants made smoke less harmful. Whether this truly helped is uncertain. What matters is that people experimented. They observed. They tried to improve what they had. You lean closer to the wall and feel warmth radiating from soot-darkened earth. Smoke stains are not merely residue. They mark success. Each dark layer means another winter survived, another night endured. The room grows quieter. Smoke thickens slightly as the fire settles. This is the signal to sleep. No one announces it. Bodies recognize the moment. You curl inward, tucking hands close to chest, preserving warmth. You think briefly of above-ground houses again. Smoke races upward, vanishing uselessly into the night. Here, it stays long enough to matter. It shares its heat before it leaves. There is debate among modern scholars about whether medieval families fully understood the risks they accepted. Sitting here, that question feels misplaced. Understanding risk requires alternatives. When cold kills quickly, smoke becomes tolerable. You feel drowsy now. The air grows still. Breathing slows. The fire murmurs softly. A low companion sound. Smoke drifts lazily toward its exit, carrying warmth with it, but leaving enough behind. This is the 7th lesson winter teaches you. Survival rarely comes clean. It arrives wrapped in side effects, discomforts, compromises. You accept smoke because it brings heat. You accept irritation because it allows rest. Underground. Perfection is not the goal. Balance is. You close your eyes, trusting the rhythms around you. Someone will tend the fire if it falters. Someone will clear the air if it thickens too much. Shared space means shared vigilance. Above you, winter scours the land with wind and ice. Down here, smoke hangs low, holding warmth like a promise it intends to keep. You breathe in slowly, no longer bothered by the smell. It signals safety now, a reminder that fire still burns, that heat still lingers. That morning will come, and as sleep settles over you, you understand why medieval families accepted this air without complaint. It meant they were still alive. You hear them before you see them. A soft shifting, the scrape of a hoof, the quiet, patient sound of an animal settling its weight. Underground, warmth is never wasted, and living bodies produce more of it than fire alone ever could. When winter tightens its grip, the boundary between human and animal space blurs, not out of affection, but out of necessity. The heat is unmistakable, a slow, steady presence that fills the room without flame or smoke. Livestock radiate warmth constantly, their bodies working through cold nights without pause. When you sit near them, You feel it seep through layers of wool and skin. A gentle reminder that survival is often shared. In many cold regions, families brought animals indoors during the harshest months. Cows, goats, sheep, sometimes even pigs occupied adjoining spaces or shared floors, separated only by low partitions. Archaeological layouts make this clear. Dwellings were often designed with shallow channels or barriers that marked zones rather than walls. The separation was practical, not absolute. You shift slightly, making room. The animal beside you exhales. Its breath slow and warm. Steam curls faintly in the low light. This is not romantic. It smells. It is noisy. It is inconvenient. But it works. Animal body heat raises ambient temperature in enclosed spaces, sometimes by several degrees. That difference matters when cold presses relentlessly from every direction. You notice how the air near the animals feels less sharp, less eager to steal warmth from your skin. There is a small, easily overlooked detail hidden in old winter routines. Animals were often fed more generously during deep cold, not only to keep them healthy, but to increase the heat they produced. More digestion meant more warmth. The household became a living system, each part feeding the others. You hear the slow chewing, the rhythmic sound of survival. It becomes background noise, as familiar as the crackle of fire. Children grow up with these sounds, learning early that animals are not distant resources, but winter companions. This closeness reshapes daily life. You sleep lighter. Movements must be careful. Animals shift unexpectedly. Hooves scrape straw. A sudden snort breaks silence. Yet none of this startles you for long. It is preferable to the sound of wind screaming through cracks above ground. There are health concerns. Of course, living so close invites disease, parasites, respiratory issues. People noticed this. They aired spaces when weather allowed. They layered straw thickly. They cleaned constantly. Cleanliness did not mean sterile. It meant controlled. Some winter accounts describe families timing animal movement carefully. Animals were brought in only during the coldest stretches, then returned to outdoor shelters when temperatures rose slightly. This ebb and flow mirrored the winter itself. Flexible, responsive. You rest your hand on packed earth warmed indirectly by animal bodies. The floor here feels different. Less cold, slightly alive. Heat settles downward and stays. There is an unspoken understanding that animals come first during the worst nights. Their survival ensures future food. Labor, milk, wool. Protecting them protects the household's future. Underground living makes this possible. Above ground, animals freeze too quickly. Down here, they endure. You recall that some underground homes were deliberately expanded to accommodate livestock. Additional pits dug, adjacent chambers carved. These were not afterthoughts. They were planned responses to winter severity. There is debate among modern researchers about how comfortable this arrangement truly was. Some suggest it was deeply unpleasant. Others point out that people acclimate quickly when necessity demands it. Sitting here, sharing space and warmth, the discomfort fades into routine. You feel drowsy again. Animal warmth creates a steady baseline that fire alone cannot maintain overnight. Embers fade, but bodies remain warm. This continuity matters when sleep stretches long and movement risks heat loss. You hear a quiet lowing, barely audible. It does not bother you. It reassures. Life is still functioning, breathing, digesting, enduring. There is a curious psychological effect to this closeness. Fear diminishes. Loneliness recedes. Winter nights feel less empty when surrounded by living beings. Even the presence of animals offers comfort in a world narrowed by cold. Some folklore grew from these arrangements. Stories of animals sensing danger, of warmth protecting souls, of shared breath binding household fate. Whether believed or not, these stories softened the reality of winter survival. You adjust straw beneath you. The scent of animal and earth blends with smoke. It is strong, but it signals safety. It means you are not alone. This is the 8th lesson winter teaches you. Warmth is not always something you build. Sometimes it is something you share. Survival becomes communal, crossing boundaries you might otherwise maintain. Underground. Hierarchy flattens. Everyone who produces heat matters. Fire, body, animal, earth. Each plays a role. You close your eyes, listening to the slow rhythms around you. Breathing overlaps. Hooves shift. The fire sighs softly. Heat settles. Above, snow deepens. Wind howls uselessly against soil and timber. Below, warmth accumulates quietly, patiently, drawn from every living thing willing to give a little of itself. You drift closer to sleep, comforted by the steady presence beside you. Winter still reigns outside. But here, underground, life clusters tightly enough to hold it at bay. You notice the silence first. Not the absence of sound entirely, but the way it changes character. Above ground, winter is loud. Wind claws at walls. Snow scrapes across roofs. Ice cracks and shifts with sharp reports in the night. Every noise feels like a warning. Down here, those sounds lose their edges. They arrive softened, padded, as if wrapped in layers of cloth before reaching you. The storm still exists. You know that, but it no longer announces itself with the same urgency. Snow is an unlikely ally in this. When it piles thick above ground, it absorbs sound remarkably well. Underground. You sit beneath both soil and snow, a double layer that turns chaos into hush. What reaches you is a low, distant murmur, steady enough to become almost soothing. You listen carefully. The wind does not scream. It hums. It becomes a presence rather than a threat. This change matters more than you might expect. Noise keeps the body alert. Silence allows it to rest. People living through medieval winters often described storms as exhausting, even when they caused no direct damage. The constant noise drained attention, kept sleep shallow, fed anxiety. Underground, storms lost that power. They still battered the landscape, but they no longer battered the mind. You settle more deeply into the space, shoulders dropping as tension eases. The earth presses back gently, holding sound the way it holds warmth. It does not echo, it absorbs. This quiet reshapes nights entirely. Conversations drop to whispers not out of fear, but because there is no need to speak loudly. Even a soft voice carries in the close space. Silence becomes the default, broken only when necessary. You hear the fire's smallest movements. A pop, a shift. These sounds feel intimate rather than alarming. You know exactly what they mean. Fire alive, fire safe. The storm above grows stronger, yet it feels farther away. Snow slides from a roof somewhere. The sound arrives as a muted thump, like something heavy being set down gently. You imagine how violent it must look from above ground. Snow tearing loose, wind whipping it sideways. Down here, it becomes almost polite. There is something deeply human about this response. When danger cannot be eliminated, distance helps. Underground living does not stop winter. It reframes it. It turns an overwhelming force into background presence. Some observers suggest that this acoustic dampening played a larger role in winter survival than we often acknowledge. Fear keeps people awake. Exhaustion weakens them. Quiet allows recovery. Sitting here, wrapped in hush, you feel that truth settle into your bones. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. Darkness is familiar now. The absence of sound sharpens other senses. You smell smoke and earth more clearly. You feel warmth pooling near your legs. You notice the steady breathing of others nearby. Silence reveals patterns. You hear how often the fire needs attention, how animals shift weight periodically, how people turn in their sleep. This awareness creates predictability. Predictability creates safety. Above ground, storms disrupt routine. Underground. Routine persists. Meals are eaten. Repairs are made. Stories are told. Winter may rage. But life continues at a manageable pace. There is a subtle emotional shift that comes with this quiet. Time slows. Hours stretch. Nights feel long but not frantic. You stop counting minutes. You start counting warmth, counting embers, counting breaths. Some communities even marked wintertime differently, measuring days by fire cycles rather than daylight. Underground living encouraged this internal clock. The outside world faded. The household became its own small universe. You think again of above-ground dwellings, how wind howls through rafters, how snow rattles shutters, how ice groans against stone. Those sounds demand attention. They keep you awake. They remind you of vulnerability. Down here, vulnerability exists, but it whispers rather than shouts. There is a curious detail hidden in some winter accounts. People reported sleeping more deeply underground. Even when conditions were harsher, the absence of constant noise allowed longer rest. Fewer waking moments. More complete recovery. Sleep, in winter, is not luxury. It is fuel. You adjust your position slightly, straw rustling softly. Even that sound feels loud in the hush. Someone nearby shifts, then settles again. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. Silence becomes communal, shared, respected. The storm continues outside. You sense it more than hear it. Pressure shifts. The earth above tightens slightly, holding everything in place. You feel secure rather than threatened. This is the 9th lesson winter teaches you. Survival is not only about warmth and food, it is about reducing noise, both literal and mental. When the world quiets, the body heals. Underground, winter loses its voice. You let the hush wash over you, smoothing sharp thoughts, easing tension you did not realize you were holding. The fire glows steadily. Animals breathe. People sleep. Above, snow buries paths and fields and fences. Down here, silence buries fear. You close your eyes again, not out of exhaustion now, but out of comfort. The earth does not speak. It simply holds. And in that holding, you find rest. You begin to miss the light before you miss almost anything else. Not warmth, not food, light. It slips away quietly, thinning day by day until it becomes a brief visitor rather than a constant companion. Underground. That loss feels sharper. Darkness arrives early and settles in without apology. The opening that admits daylight is narrow by design, too wide, and warmth escapes, too small, and smoke lingers dangerously. Builders learn to carve this balance carefully. The result is a pale stripe of light that crawls across the floor for a short time each day, never lingering long enough to feel generous. You watch it move, slowly, deliberately, as if time itself has thickened. This is not the darkness of nightfall above ground, where moonlight and snow still reflect faint brightness. Underground darkness is complete. It absorbs detail. It softens edges. Your eyes adjust eventually, but vision becomes suggestion rather than certainty. Fire takes over where sunlight withdraws. Every flame matters now. You treat embers with respect. You shield them from careless drafts. Fire becomes both light source and clock. When it burns bright, the day continues. When it fades, rest approaches. There is an unspoken economy here. Light is spent carefully. Torches are not waved unnecessarily. Candles are reserved for moments that require precision. Mending, eating, tending to children. The rest of the time, shadows suffice. Some winter accounts hint that families trained themselves to do tasks by feel rather than sight. Hands learned textures. Fingers recognized tools. This adaptation happened quietly, driven by necessity rather than instruction. Underground living reshaped perception itself. You sit near the wall and notice how firelight behaves differently here. It does not scatter. It clings. Shadows stay close, huddled around objects rather than stretching away. The room feels smaller but more contained, as if light itself understands the limits of space. There is a curious side effect to this limited illumination. Faces appear more expressive. A flicker of flame exaggerates features. Eyes catch light suddenly. Emotions feel closer, harder to hide. Underground living makes honesty unavoidable. You hear someone laugh softly. The sound glows in the dark the way fire does. Moments become intense because they are not diluted by brightness. Each expression carries weight. Some researchers suggest that long winters spent in low light influence sleep patterns deeply. People slept in segments rather than long stretches, waking briefly to tend fires, check animals, or simply sit quietly before returning to rest. Underground darkness encouraged this rhythm. It felt natural rather than disruptive. You experience it yourself. Sleep comes, then lifts gently. You wake without alarm, aware of warmth and quiet. Fire still burns. All is well. You drift back under. This cycle repeats night after night. Darkness becomes familiar, less frightening, almost protective. Above ground, darkness hides danger. Down here, it hides nothing new. Everything you need is within reach. There is a small but telling detail uncovered in some underground dwellings. Walls near entrances are often smoother, more polished. Hands touch them repeatedly, using them to orient in dim light. These surfaces carry the memory of countless fingertips tracing paths in the dark. You follow one such wall now, guiding yourself without looking. Your body learns the space. Light becomes helpful rather than essential. Still, the longing for sunlight does not vanish. When that brief beam appears, everyone notices. Children pause. Adults glance up. Work slows for a moment as eyes drink it in. The warmth of sunlight feels different from fire. Cleaner, sharper, fleeting. People time tasks around this moment. Drying cloth, checking repairs, observing weather through the entrance. The day's only real connection to the outside world arrives quietly, then leaves. Some winter stories speak of sunlight as a promise rather than a resource, proof that the world above still exists, that seasons will turn, that this will end. Underground living makes that promise precious. You sit and watch dust motes float briefly in the beam, then vanish as the light shifts. Darkness returns smoothly, without drama. No one sighs. No one complains. You have learned not to waste energy on what cannot be changed. Firelight takes over again. Shadows gather. The room settles. There is debate among historians about how people coped psychologically with prolonged darkness. Some suggest depression deepened. Others argue that communal living, routine, and shared purpose offset the loss of light. Sitting here, surrounded by warmth and quiet presence, you feel less isolated than you might expect. Darkness compresses social space. People stay close. Stories are told. Songs are hummed softly. Hands find each other. Light may be scarce, but connection is not. You close your eyes and realize you no longer need to see to feel safe. Familiar sounds orient you. Familiar warmth reassures. Darkness becomes background rather than threat. This is the 10th lesson winter teaches you. Light is valuable, but it is not everything. When warmth, food, and companionship are secured, darkness loses its power. Underground. Winter takes the sun, but it cannot take rhythm. It cannot take memory. It cannot take hope. You settle again, letting firelight fade naturally rather than fighting it. Night deepens. Sleep returns. The world narrows to breath and warmth and quiet trust. Above, the sun may rise unseen. Down here, you wait patiently, knowing that when light does come, even briefly, it will be enough. You start to notice it in the corners first, a darker patch where the wall never fully dries. A faint, earthy smell that lingers even when the fire burns steadily. Moisture is the quiet adversary of underground life. Patient and persistent. Never dramatic. Never fully absent. Warmth brings breath. Breath brings vapor. Earth holds it. Living below ground means negotiating constantly with dampness. The soil around you contains water even when frozen above. That moisture slowly seeps inward, drawn by heat and human presence. You cannot stop it entirely. You can only manage it. You touch the wall and feel coolness beneath your palm. Not cold, but wet enough to matter. This is familiar territory for medieval families. They learned early that moisture could undo everything warmth accomplished. Wet bedding steals heat faster than cold air ever could. Damp grain spoils. Mold creeps. So you adapt. You notice how the fire is positioned not just for warmth, but for drying. It is angled toward problem spots. Its heat licks at walls where moisture collects, encouraging evaporation. Smoke helps too, slowing mold growth even as it irritates lungs. This balancing act defines underground winter living. Too much fire dries the air harshly, cracking skin and throats. Too little invites damp to settle deeper. You adjust constantly, reading the space like weather. Some underground homes reveal evidence of deliberate moisture channels. Shallow grooves cut into floors, small trenches leading toward entrances. These guided water away from sleeping areas, sacrificing one spot to save the rest. You step carefully around such a channel now, knowing its purpose without needing explanation. There is a detail hidden in the materials used. Clay mixed with ash appears frequently in wall linings. Ash absorbs moisture and discourages mold. Clay seals cracks. Together, they create a breathable barrier. This mixture shows up again and again in cold region dwellings, suggesting people noticed what worked and repeated it faithfully. You feel the air shift as someone opens a vent briefly. A rush of cold sneaks in, sharp and unpleasant, but necessary. Fresh air clears damp, clears smoke, resets the balance. The vent closes again quickly. Warmth returns. Moisture retreats. Temporarily. This constant adjustment becomes second nature. No one complains. Complaints do not dry walls. Action does. There is a curious habit associated with damp winters. Families hung tools, clothing, even food near the ceiling where smoke and warmth concentrated. This vertical use of space kept essentials dry and usable. The ceiling becomes storage not out of convenience, but necessity. You watch water beads slowly on a wooden post, then evaporate as the fire flares slightly. This is victory measured in inches. Minutes. Small successes repeated endlessly. Some observers suggest dampness posed greater health risks than cold itself. Coughs lingered. Skin infections festered. Rheumatism worsened. People knew this. Even if they lacked medical language, they noticed patterns. Damp years brought sickness. Dry years brought relief. You remember earlier sections. The silence. The warmth. The closeness. Damp threatens all of that. It rots straw, weakens beams, turns comfort into danger quietly. So underground living demands vigilance. You cannot relax fully. You must pay attention. Winter survival is active, not passive. You press fresh straw into a damp spot, replacing what has grown musty. This is daily maintenance. Not heroic, not dramatic, just necessary. There is disagreement among historians about whether damp drove some families back above ground despite cold. Evidence suggests some did abandon underground spaces when moisture became unmanageable. Others refined their techniques, improving drainage and ventilation over time. Adaptation followed experience. You lean back and breathe carefully. The air smells cleaner now. Smoke thins. The fire settles. Moisture recedes slightly. The balance holds. For now, this environment teaches patience. Nothing happens quickly underground. Moisture arrives slowly. It leaves slowly. You learn to think in days rather than hours. There is an odd comfort in that pace. Urgency fades. Attention deepens. You notice small changes. You respond before problems grow. Children learn this awareness early. They are taught to feel walls, to notice smells, to report damp spots. Survival knowledge passes quietly, hand to hand. You recall that some underground homes were abandoned not because they failed structurally, but because damp made them unbearable. This was not failure of design, so much as limits of location. Soil type mattered. High water tables punished those who dug too deep. Experience taught caution. You feel gratitude for the slope your home rests in. Water drains outward rather than pooling beneath you. This was not luck. It was choice, informed by watching where snow melted fastest, where puddles lingered longest. This is the 11th lesson winter teaches you. Warmth alone is not enough. Dry warmth is survival. Damp warmth is deception. Underground life succeeds only when moisture is kept in check, when vigilance replaces complacency, when small adjustments prevent large disasters. You stretch, joints aching slightly. The fire crackles. The air holds steady. For now, balance is restored. Outside, snow continues to fall, sealing the earth further, insulating even more. Down here, moisture waits, patient but contained. You lie back, aware that rest is possible only because someone will keep watching, keep adjusting, keep listening to what the walls are saying. And in that quiet vigilance, winter loses another small advantage. You begin to realize that winter does not feel the same everywhere, even underground. The cold carries different personalities depending on where you are. Soil changes, wind patterns shift, snow behaves differently. What works in one place must be adjusted in another. And medieval families learned this through careful attention rather than maps or forecasts. You imagine moving across the landscape. In the north, frost bites deeper and lingers longer. The ground hardens early, demanding that digging begin sooner. Underground homes there sink lower, wrapped more tightly in soil. Entrances tucked carefully away from prevailing winds. Snow piles thick and stays put, becoming part of the insulation rather than a threat. Farther south, winters shorten but remain unpredictable. Freeze and thaw cycles complicate everything. Moisture becomes the primary concern rather than raw cold. Homes are dug shallower, allowing easier drainage and faster drying. Earth shelters here focus less on depth and more on placement. You feel this distinction in the walls around you. The soil texture tells a story. Sandy earth drains quickly but collapses easily. Clay holds shape but traps moisture. Loam balances both, prized where it could be found. People learned these differences not through theory, but through failure. Walls that fell taught caution. Floors that flooded taught restraint. In mountainous regions, underground living often hugged slopes rather than plains. Digging into hillsides offered stability and drainage, while reducing exposure to wind. Snow slid down inclines instead of piling dangerously above entrances. You picture these homes nestled quietly into terrain, nearly invisible under winter cover. Coastal areas posed different challenges. Salt air, shifting sands, and damp winds complicated underground shelter. Here, earth homes were often combined with heavy timber, raised slightly to avoid saturation while still benefiting from insulation. The earth still helped, but it shared responsibility. You realize now that there was no single medieval solution to winter. Underground living adapted to context. This flexibility explains why similar structures appear in distant regions with subtle variations. Survival techniques spread, but they were never copied blindly. Some historians argue that regional climate shaped social structure as much as architecture. Harsher winters demanded closer cooperation. Milder ones allowed more independence. Underground living reflects this. In colder regions, homes cluster tightly. In milder ones, they spread out, sharing techniques without sharing walls. You listen again to the earth around you. It feels different than it would elsewhere. The dampness here is manageable. The cold, steady rather than sharp. You sense that this place was chosen carefully, informed by generations who understood its limits. There is a detail uncovered in regional studies that speaks quietly to this awareness. In some areas, underground homes are rebuilt every few decades, while in others they persist for centuries. The difference often lies not in skill, but in soil stability and water behavior. Good ground rewards patience. Bad ground demands movement. You imagine a family abandoning an underground home, not because winter defeated them, but because spring revealed its flaws. Water pooled where it should not. Walls softened. The earth spoke clearly. They listened and moved. This responsiveness is key. Underground living was never about stubbornly clinging to one solution. It was about adjusting to what the land allowed. People observed snowmelt patterns, wind channels, frost depth. They chose sites with care, knowing mistakes were costly. You feel a quiet respect for this attentiveness. Modern life often insulates you from consequences. Medieval winter offered no such buffer. Errors were immediate. Learning was swift. Some regions developed hybrid approaches, semi-underground storage spaces paired with above-ground sleeping areas, or underground sleeping pits used only during the coldest weeks. These variations reflect experimentation rather than doctrine. You think again of how sound, warmth, moisture, and light behave differently underground. Now add geography to that equation. Each place tuned the balance slightly differently. What remained constant was the principle: lower yourself into the earth, and winter loses some of its power. There is still disagreement about whether underground living spread primarily through cultural exchange or independent discovery. Did people teach each other? Or did similar conditions produce similar responses? The answer likely shifts from place to place. Harsh environments tend to produce familiar solutions. You sit quietly, imagining voices from other regions echoing this same experience. Different soil under different hands. The same cold pressing down. This is the 12th lesson winter teaches you. There is no universal shelter. Survival listens to place. It adapts. It responds. It never assumes. Underground living succeeded not because it was perfect, but because it was flexible. Families adjusted depth, materials, layout, timing. They learned from neighbors and from land itself. You rest your palm against the wall again, feeling its particular texture. This earth holds warmth well. It drains reasonably. It resists collapse. Someone noticed this long before you arrived. Outside, snow continues to fall in patterns shaped by terrain you cannot see from here. Down here, those patterns matter only indirectly. The earth absorbs them, translating chaos into manageable conditions. You breathe in slowly. The air feels balanced tonight, neither too damp nor too dry. Warm enough, quiet enough. You realize that underground living was never about escaping winter entirely. It was about choosing how winter touched you. Geography decided the details. Experience refined them. And as you sit there, wrapped in soil and silence, you understand why this approach endured across regions and centuries. The ground, when chosen wisely, remembers how to help. You begin to smell winter food before you see it. Earthy, dry, heavy, the scent of roots pulled months ago, of grain sealed away from air, of meat reduced to its most stubborn form. Underground. Storage is not an afterthought. It is one of the main reasons you are here at all. You move toward a recessed wall and feel the temperature change slightly. Cooler, more even. This corner is not meant for sleeping or sitting. It is meant to hold time still. Food rests here the way warmth rests in soil. Slowly, carefully, without drama. Long before winter tightened its grip, these spaces were prepared. Pits dug, shelves carved, containers sealed. Underground storage offered something rare: predictability. While surface temperatures swung wildly, the earth below stayed steady enough to slow spoilage without freezing everything solid. You reach toward a bundle wrapped in cloth. Dried roots. Leathery, but intact. carrots, turnips, beets, pulled before frost and layered with straw. They smell faintly sweet, tinged with soil, underground. They remain edible long after surface stores would rot or freeze. Grain sits nearby, packed tightly in sacks or bins lined with clay. Moisture is the enemy here too. Ash is scattered carefully to absorb damp. Containers are lifted off the floor just enough to avoid seepage. Every detail reflects trial and error refined over generations. You remember that underground living was not just about surviving the cold nights. It was about surviving the months between harvests. Food failure killed more quietly than winter storms. Underground storage reduced that risk. There is a small but telling detail buried in winter routines. Families often checked stored food daily, not to consume it, but to listen to it. Grain shifts. Roots soften. Mold announces itself early if you pay attention. Storage was active, not passive. You kneel and feel the earth beneath these stores. It is firm, cool, reliable. The ground insulates food the way it insulates bodies. It slows change. That slowness is everything. Some underground homes were designed with storage pits deeper than living areas. Cold sinks. These lower chambers stayed just cool enough to preserve food without freezing liquids solid. Milk soured more slowly. Butter kept longer. Fermentation could be controlled rather than left to chance. You think about how much planning this required. Digging separate chambers. Managing airflow. Timing access so cold air did not flood living spaces. None of this happened accidentally. There is still discussion among scholars about whether underground storage drove underground living, or whether living underground simply made storage easier. Sitting here, surrounded by both warmth and preserved food. The distinction feels artificial. One enabled the other. Survival systems interlocked. You hear someone unwrap a small portion nearby. The sound is careful. Nothing is wasted. Portions are measured by need rather than desire. Underground life encourages restraint. Excess has nowhere to hide. The smells grow stronger when food is exposed. Smoke clings to everything, adding another layer of preservation. Meat hangs stiff and dark, its surface sealed by drying and smoke. Fat, rendered earlier in the year, sits in small containers. Precious beyond words. Calories matter more than flavor now. You chew slowly, aware that this food represents months of foresight. Underground storage makes winter survivable, not because it creates abundance, but because it stretches scarcity into something manageable. Children learn this lesson early. They see stores dwindle gradually. They understand that winter is a long conversation between appetite and patience. Underground living makes that conversation visible. You cannot forget how much remains when it sits beside you every day. There is an odd psychological comfort in this visibility. Anxiety eases when you can see what you have. Above ground, stores might freeze, spoil, or disappear. Underground, they remain stable enough to trust. You notice how the storage area is kept darker and quieter than the rest of the home. Disturbance invites spoilage. Warmth accelerates decay. This space is respected, entered deliberately, left alone as much as possible. Some families marked storage pits with symbols or simple carvings. Not decorative, but mnemonic. This pit for grain, that one for roots. Memory is easier when reinforced by place. You think again of the earth as a collaborator. It does not feed you directly, but it protects what does. Underground living turns soil into a partner in survival. There is disagreement about how much medieval families understood the science behind this preservation. What they understood clearly were outcomes. Food stored underground lasted longer. Families that used these methods survived harsher winters. That knowledge spread without explanation. You finish your portion and carefully rewrap what remains. The bundle returns to its place. The wall closes around it visually. The smell fades. Winter nights feel shorter when food security is assured. Hunger sharpens fear. Full bellies allow rest. Underground storage quiets one of winter's loudest threats. You lean back and feel warmth settle again. The earth holds food. It holds heat. It holds time. This is the 13th lesson winter teaches you. Survival is not only about enduring the present moment, it is about extending the future just far enough to reach spring. Underground living makes that extension possible. It slows rot. It preserves effort. It rewards planning. Outside, fields lie buried and useless. Down here, harvest lingers, stretched thin but steady. You close your eyes briefly, satisfied in a way that goes beyond comfort. You are not merely warm tonight. You are provisioned. And in medieval winter, that distinction means everything. You feel the space closing in as winter deepens. Not physically smaller, but fuller. Every corner is occupied. Every surface has a purpose. Bodies gather closer, not out of sentiment, but because space itself has become a resource to be shared carefully. Underground living compresses life. Movements shorten. Personal distance shrinks. What was once spread across yards and outbuildings now folds inward. Family becomes something you feel constantly. In breath, in warmth, in presence. You sit shoulder to shoulder without comment. There is no room for pacing or wandering. Every action is deliberate. Sit, work, sleep, repeat. The rhythm tightens as days blur together. This closeness reshapes conversation. Voices soften. Words become economical. Silence stretches comfortably between exchanges because no one needs reassurance that others are nearby. You hear breathing. You feel warmth. That is enough. Children adapt quickly. They learn where they can move without disturbing others. They learn when to be still. Winter teaches them spatial awareness early. Underground homes are classrooms in restraint. Adults feel the pressure more acutely. Privacy disappears. There is no corner to retreat into when tempers fray. Disagreements must be resolved or endured. Avoidance becomes impossible. This enforced closeness sharpens social skills out of necessity. Some accounts suggest winter arguments burned hot but brief. There was nowhere to storm off to. Grudges cooled faster when shared space demanded cooperation. Underground living forced resolution through proximity. You notice how tasks are shared more evenly now. No one can disappear into separate rooms. Work happens in view of everyone. Mending, cooking, tool repair. Each action visible. Each contribution acknowledged quietly. This visibility changes social dynamics. Laziness stands out. Effort earns respect. Winter becomes a constant audit of usefulness. Not in a cruel sense, but in a practical one. Everyone understands that survival depends on participation. You feel the comfort of routine settle in. Morning tasks blend into afternoon ones. Evenings slow further. Night brings shared rest. The compressed space encourages synchronized schedules. Waking and sleeping align naturally. Some observers argue that underground living strengthened family bonds. Others suggest it intensified conflict. Both can be true. Closeness magnifies everything. Affection deepens. Irritation sharpens. Winter does not allow neutrality. You sense this duality in the room. A gentle laugh here, a sigh there. Minor frustrations surface, then dissolve. The space does not permit escalation. There is no room for drama when warmth must be preserved. There is a quiet ritual to movement now. People pass carefully, bodies angled, steps memorized. This choreography develops without instruction. You learn where to place your feet, where not to step, how to avoid brushing against stored food or drying clothes. The ceiling feels lower in moments like this. The earth presses closer, as if reminding everyone of limits. It is a subtle presence, enforcing moderation. You notice how even emotions feel contained. Expressions soften. Voices rarely rise. The space absorbs sound and intensity alike. Anger feels out of place here, like shouting in a library. Children fall asleep easily, lulled by warmth and proximity. Adults follow eventually, tension easing as bodies relax into shared heat. Sleep becomes communal rather than solitary. There is an understated safety in this arrangement. Illness is noticed quickly. A cough does not go unheard. Weakness does not go unseen. Care arrives early. Underground living makes vulnerability visible. This visibility saves lives. Winter sickness can escalate rapidly. Early attention matters. Underground space ensures no one suffers unnoticed. You think again of above-ground life. Separate rooms. Separate buildings. Privacy that allows neglect. Underground. Neglect is impossible. Everything happens in front of everyone. Some communities likely found this oppressive. Others found it comforting. Adaptation depended on temperament as much as architecture. You stretch carefully, aware of bodies nearby. Someone shifts to accommodate you without waking fully. Cooperation becomes instinct. This is the 14th lesson winter teaches you. Survival is social. Warmth, food, and shelter matter. But so does proximity. Shared space enforces shared responsibility. Underground living removes the illusion of independence. It replaces it with interdependence. Winter tolerates nothing else. You settle again, breathing in air warmed by many bodies. The space hums softly with life. Not bustling, just present. Outside, winter isolates. Fields lie empty. Paths vanish. Down here, isolation dissolves. Family becomes landscape. You close your eyes, feeling the steady press of earth and people alike. It is crowded. It is imperfect. It is enough. And in medieval winter, enough is everything. You begin to sense it in small reactions from the world above. A glance held too long. A tone that shifts slightly. Underground living does more than shape comfort. It marks you. It signals necessity in a society acutely aware of difference. Living beneath the surface carries weight beyond warmth. In many medieval communities, where and how you lived announced your place in the social order. Stone houses rose where wealth gathered. Timber homes stood where modest means allowed. Underground spaces whispered something else entirely. They spoke of adaptation, of making do, of choosing survival over appearance. You feel this when you emerge briefly into daylight. Boots scrape on frozen ground. Breath plumes. Someone notices where you came from. A sunken doorway, an earth-covered wall. The knowledge settles without words. You live differently. This was not always shameful, but it was visible. In some villages, underground homes clustered on the margins, tucked into slopes or edges of fields. Not hidden, exactly, but separate. Practical solutions often occupy liminal spaces. You return below and feel relief. Judgment stays above ground. Underground, life resumes its quieter logic. Some records hint that underground living carried mixed meaning. In harsh regions, it was respected, a sign of experience, a mark of those who knew winter well. In milder areas, it could be read as desperation, a signal that resources ran thin. Status in medieval life was fragile. It shifted with harvests, illness, weather. Underground living sometimes followed bad years rather than fixed poverty. Families who once lived above ground might dig down after repeated losses. Others returned above when fortunes improved. You realize now that these homes were not permanent labels. They were responses, temporary adjustments to conditions that refused to stay stable. Still, perception mattered. Children noticed differences early. They learned which homes sat low, which rose high. They absorbed social cues without explanation. Underground living became part of identity, whether chosen or not. You think about how this affected dignity. To live underground is to accept practicality over pride. Warmth mattered more than appearance. That choice required humility. It also required courage. Some communities softened this divide by sharing resources openly. Winter blurred social lines. Hunger and cold did not discriminate. Mutual aid became necessary. Underground homes might receive extra firewood. Above-ground homes might share tools. Survival forged alliances. Yet not all responses were kind. In times of scarcity, difference bred suspicion. Underground dwellers could be seen as outsiders even within their own villages. Living differently always carries risk. You sit quietly, feeling the weight of that knowledge. The earth around you does not judge. It holds everyone equally. Society does not. There is an odd contradiction here. Underground living often proved more effective at retaining warmth than grander homes. Yet prestige clung to height, not comfort. People valued what could be seen, not what worked best. You remember earlier mention of castles looming cold above peasants sleeping warmer below. That contrast stings. Comfort and status rarely align. Some historians suggest that underground living subtly challenged social hierarchies. It demonstrated that survival did not depend on wealth alone. Knowledge and adaptation mattered more. That realization may have unsettled those who measured worth by appearance. You feel this tension in how stories were told. Underground homes rarely appear in romantic accounts. They are absent from songs and chronicles focused on glory. Yet they persist stubbornly in archaeological records, quietly proving their value. You imagine winter evenings spent underground while wealthier neighbors shivered in drafty halls. There is a quiet satisfaction in that thought. Survival carries its own dignity, even when unseen. Children raised underground learned resilience early. They understood limits. They adapted. When they emerged in spring, they carried that experience with them. Status shifts, but knowledge remains. This is the 15th lesson winter teaches you. Survival does not always look respectable. It often looks practical. Earth covered. Low profile. Unimpressive. Underground living asks you to release concern for how things appear. Winter punishes vanity quickly. It rewards adaptation slowly. You rest your hand against the wall again. Soil does not care about rank. It holds warmth for anyone willing to trust it. Outside, winter continues to sort people by preparedness rather than pride. Down here, that sorting feels distant. You breathe in quietly, accepting that survival sometimes means stepping outside social expectations. The earth becomes ally where society hesitates. And as you settle back into shared warmth, you realize something important. Dignity does not come from where you stand in winter. It comes from lasting through it. You hear it first as a tone rather than a command, a low murmur that carries authority without urgency. The church bell above ground still marks time. Even when you live beneath it, sound travels downward differently than wind or cold. It arrives softened, filtered through soil, but unmistakable. Faith does not stop at the surface. Religious life in medieval winter had to adjust, just as architecture did. Churches stood above ground, cold and drafty. Yet their influence reached even those who spent much of winter underground. Belief followed people wherever they sought shelter. You remember climbing out in the early light, breath steaming, hands stiff, joining others moving toward stone walls that held no warmth. Worship required exposure. It was one of the few reasons people willingly left the earth's protection during the coldest months. Yet underground living quietly challenged religious expectations. Dwelling so close to the soil stirred discomfort among some clergy. Earth was associated with burial, with humility, with mortality. To live partly buried blurred symbolic boundaries. You feel that unease echoed in certain sermons that warned against becoming too attached to the ground. Humanity was meant to rise, not sink. The body might return to earth eventually, but life was supposed to face the sky. And yet, winter did not listen to sermons. Some religious authorities tolerated underground living as necessity. Others viewed it with suspicion, especially when it became prolonged. Was it retreat or prudence? The distinction mattered spiritually, even if it mattered little physically. You sit quietly, thinking about how belief adapts under pressure. People prayed underground. They kept icons close. They traced symbols into earthen walls. Faith followed warmth, not architecture. There is a small but telling detail uncovered in some underground dwellings. Simple crosses scratched near entrances. Protective symbols pressed into clay before it dried. These were not decorations. They were reassurances. Marks that declared this space acceptable. sanctified enough for living. You imagine hands pressing those symbols into damp walls, fingers cold, breath visible. The act mattered more than the material. It was a way of reconciling survival with belief. Some clergy adapted too. Winter services shortened, indoor blessings extended into homes. In harsh regions, faith bent toward practicality. God, after all, was believed to be everywhere, even underground. Still, tension lingered. Living below ground challenged ideas of order and hierarchy. Churches rose tall for a reason. Height symbolized closeness to heaven. Underground homes inverted that symbolism, valuing warmth over verticality. You feel that inversion physically. The ceiling presses close. The earth above feels heavy. Yet comfort lives here, not above. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. Some theologians of the time debated whether prolonged underground living dulled spiritual discipline. Comfort, they worried, softened resolve. Others argued that preserving life honored divine creation. Survival itself was an act of faith. You feel that argument play out quietly in daily choices. Do you attend services in dangerous cold, or stay underground to protect children? Do you prioritize ritual, or warmth winter forces decisions theology alone cannot resolve? Families navigated this tension pragmatically. They attended when they could. They prayed when they could not. Faith became portable, adaptable, intimate. You notice how prayer sounds underground. Softer, more personal. Words sink into earth rather than echo off stone. The space absorbs them the way it absorbs sound and heat. There is a comfort in that absorption. It feels private, safe, less performative. Some winter traditions grew from this shift. Home prayers, family rituals, blessings over stored food. Faith moved inward, just as living space did. You imagine children learning prayers by firelight, tracing symbols in soot-darkened walls. Religion becomes part of survival rhythm rather than public display. This adaptation unsettled some authorities, who worried about losing influence when worship moved into homes. Underground living redistributed spiritual focus from communal spaces to family ones. Yet winter left little choice. Churches could not be heated effectively. Underground homes could. You feel the balance settle. Belief remains, but its expression changes. Like everything else in winter, it adapts. This is the 16th lesson winter teaches you. Even belief must bend to survive. Faith does not vanish underground. It roots itself there. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the faint echo of bells filtered through soil. The sound reminds you of the world above, but it no longer commands you. Down here, warmth and breath and life take priority. Faith walks alongside them. Quieter, closer, more grounded. And as winter deepens, you understand that living underground was not a rejection of belief. It was a negotiation with reality. You notice it most in the children, not in what they say, but in how they move. They duck instinctively. They navigate the low ceiling without thinking. Their hands know where the walls are, even in darkness. Underground, childhood takes a different shape, molded quietly by space, season, and necessity. Children grow up close to the ground here, both literally and figuratively. Winter does not allow distance. They sleep within arm's reach of adults. They wake to the same air, the same warmth, the same muted hush. Independence arrives later. Awareness arrives early. You watch a child cross the room without looking down. Feet avoiding damp spots. Hands skimming walls for balance. No one taught this explicitly. It was learned through repetition, through nights spent half awake listening to fire and breathing. Underground space educates without instruction. Their games are smaller. There is no running, no shouting. Play becomes quiet and precise. Pebbles arranged carefully, shadows traced with fingers. Stories whispered rather than shouted. Creativity turns inward. adapting to limits rather than resisting them. Winter accelerates maturity. Children learn quickly what matters. They understand that fire must not be disturbed. That food is counted. That straw must be kept dry. These lessons are not delivered as lectures. They are absorbed through daily observation. You feel the seriousness settle early in them, but not heaviness. There is laughter here too, soft and sudden, flashing briefly like firelight. Joy adapts just as survival does. Some winter records describe children as especially resilient during underground living, less bothered by smoke and darkness than adults. Their bodies adjust faster. Their expectations form around what exists rather than what is missing. This adaptability becomes a quiet advantage. You notice how children sleep deeply, wrapped tightly, breathing evenly. The steady warmth and constant presence soothe them. Nightmares fade when no one sleeps alone. Underground. Fear has little room to grow. Learning happens through proximity. Children hear every conversation. They absorb adult worries and strategies without being shielded from them. This transparency builds competence early. They know how fragile survival can be, and how it is maintained. There is an odd detail hidden in some accounts of winter life. Children often became the most reliable monitors of the environment. They noticed changes adults overlooked. A new smell, a drip starting, a draft returning. Their senses sharpened by constant closeness. You watch one child pause, sniff the air, then glance toward a wall where damp has begun to creep back. An adult follows the look and adjusts the fire. No words exchanged. Awareness shared. This intimacy shapes emotional development too. Children learn empathy early. They feel discomfort ripple through the group. They understand when silence is needed, when stillness matters. Underground space rewards sensitivity. There is less privacy, but also less isolation. Emotional states are communal. Sadness is noticed. Fatigue is acknowledged. Comfort is offered quickly because there is nowhere else for it to go. Some observers suggest this environment produced adults who were deeply attuned to group dynamics. Cooperation was not optional. It was learned before reading or counting. You imagine children emerging in spring, blinking in open light. Bodies lean. Movements careful. They carry underground habits with them. They stay close. They conserve energy. They notice weather changes quickly. Not all effects are gentle. Some children likely felt confined, restless, frustrated by limits they could not escape. Winter does not spare temperament. It shapes it. Yet even restlessness finds expression. Children help more, carrying straw, fetching water, tending animals. Responsibility arrives early because it must. There is no consensus among scholars about whether underground childhoods were psychologically beneficial or harmful. Evidence suggests variation. What is clear is that children adapted because adaptation was required. You think again of how winter compresses life. Underground living intensifies that compression. Childhood and adulthood blur slightly. Everyone shares the same risks. Everyone shares the same warmth. You watch a child listening to an elder's story. Eyes reflecting firelight. Stories matter here. They fill dark hours. They carry lessons disguised as entertainment. Underground nights stretch long, and storytelling becomes education. Children learn history this way, not from books, but from memory passed orally. Tales of past winters, of mistakes, of clever solutions. Knowledge flows naturally in close quarters. You feel a quiet respect for how these young lives unfold, not sheltered in the modern sense, but supported, held by walls of earth and networks of attention. This is the 17th lesson winter teaches you. Survival knowledge begins early. Childhood does not wait for comfort to arrive. It adapts alongside everyone else. Underground. Children grow not taller faster, but steadier, more aware, more connected to those around them. You hear soft breathing nearby. Small and even. Sleep comes easily here when warmth holds and fear is distant. Tomorrow will look much like today. Predictability becomes comfort. Outside, winter rages. indifferent to age. Down here. The youngest members of the household learn quietly how to endure it, and when spring finally comes, they will carry that knowledge upward, etched into muscle and memory. Long after the earth releases its hold, you feel it in your joints before you name it. A stiffness that lingers longer each morning. A dull ache that settles in once the fire burns low. Underground living trades one set of dangers for another, and winter never forgets to collect its due. Warmth keeps you alive. It does not keep you entirely well. Living close to earth and smoke changes the body slowly. Coughs linger. Chests feel heavy after long nights breathing thick air. Skin dries and cracks from constant heat, then softens again when damp creeps back. The body adjusts, but it never fully relaxes. You stretch carefully, listening to joints protest before they cooperate. Cold does not shock you here the way it would above ground, but it presses steadily, a quiet weight rather than a sharp blow. That steadiness wears on you in different ways. Some winter ailments fade underground. Frostbite becomes rare. Hypothermia retreats. Sleep improves. Others rise quietly. Respiratory trouble. Eye irritation. Skin infections that thrive in warmth and moisture. Survival shifts the balance rather than eliminating risk. You notice how people move differently now. Slower. More deliberate. Sudden motions are avoided, not only to conserve heat, but because bodies feel less forgiving. Underground living encourages economy of movement. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. There is an unspoken routine around health. Someone coughs too often and others pay attention. Someone limps and tasks shift slightly. Care is informal but constant. In close quarters, neglect is obvious. You smell herbs burning faintly near the fire. Not for flavor, for relief. People learned which plants soothed lungs, which eased aches, which masked the damp scent of illness. Whether they truly healed mattered less than whether they helped people endure. You feel the warmth settle again and understand its double edge. Heat relaxes muscles, but it also invites lethargy. Too much stillness weakens the body. People balance rest with light movement. Standing briefly, stretching slowly, keeping circulation alive. Some underground homes show evidence of deliberate activity zones. Small, cleared spaces where people could move without disturbing others. These were not luxuries. They were preventative measures against stiffness and decline. You think again of smoke. It preserves warmth but irritates lungs. People learn to sleep low, where air felt slightly clearer. Children were often placed farthest from the hearth, elders closer to warmth. Arrangement became treatment. There is disagreement among modern observers about how severe health trade-offs truly were. Skeletal remains suggest many survived into older age despite these conditions. Others show signs of chronic stress. Variation was enormous. Location, ventilation, diet, and care all mattered. You feel gratitude for the balance you have now. Air clear enough, fire steady, damp held at bay, health maintained through attention rather than comfort. Illness changes how winter feels. A simple fever becomes dangerous when movement is limited. Underground living both helps and hinders. Warmth supports recovery. Close quarters spread sickness quickly. You notice how people isolate subtly when ill. Bedding shifts. Tools are shared less. Small adjustments reduce spread without formal understanding of contagion. Observation guides behavior. Children, especially, are watched closely. Their resilience is strong, but illness steals it quickly. Underground space allows immediate response. No one suffers unnoticed. You listen to breathing again, counting rhythms unconsciously. Regular breath means safety. Irregular draws attention. Care follows awareness. There is a quiet resilience in these routines. No panic, no dramatics, just steady response to what winter brings. You feel a cough rise, then fade. Smoke irritation rather than sickness. You sip water warmed near the fire. Hydration matters here more than above ground. Dry heat steals moisture quickly. Food helps too. Fat-rich meals sustain bodies through cold and illness alike. Underground storage ensures this nourishment remains available when needed most. Some winter practices seem strange from a distance. Bloodletting, heated stones, herbal compresses. Their effectiveness varied, but they reflect a determination to intervene rather than surrender. You realize that underground living made health visible in ways surface life did not. Bodies shared space. Changes were noticed early. Care arrived faster. This visibility likely saved lives, even as it exposed vulnerabilities. Trade-offs again. Always trade-offs. This is the 18th lesson winter teaches you. Survival is not the same as wellness. Warmth buys time. Attention buys health. Underground living keeps you alive long enough for care to matter. It does not eliminate suffering. It manages it. You settle again, breathing more easily now. The fire murmurs. Someone shifts straw. Balance holds for another night. Outside, winter continues without concern for your aches or coughs. Down here, care fills the space winter leaves behind. And in that care, health endures just long enough to see another dawn, even if that dawn arrives unseen beneath the earth. You notice the change not when winter arrives, but when it loosens its grip just slightly. A day when the air above feels almost gentle, a drip where ice once held firm. Underground. These signals arrive muted, but they are unmistakable. Winter does not end all at once. It releases its hold in stages, and with that release comes movement. Some homes begin to empty slowly, almost cautiously, as if unsure whether warmth can be trusted yet. Underground living, for many families, was never meant to be permanent. It was a seasonal arrangement, entered deliberately and left just as carefully. You feel that hesitation now. The earth has kept you alive. Leaving it feels risky. People waited for signs. Snow melting evenly rather than refreezing at night. Soil softening without collapsing. Animals growing restless. These cues mattered more than dates on a calendar. Winter taught patience. Spring demanded proof. In some regions, underground spaces were abandoned entirely once warmth returned. Bedding carried out, fires extinguished, entrances sealed loosely to prevent collapse or intrusion. The home slept through summer, waiting for cold to call again. Other families transitioned gradually. Daytime activities moved above ground first. Nights remained underground until temperatures stabilized. This overlap reduced shock. Bodies adjusted slowly, just as they had adjusted when descending months earlier. You imagine that first night spent fully above ground again. The wind feels intrusive. Sounds feel sharp. Space feels too open. Underground living rewired comfort. Surface life takes time to feel safe again. Archaeological patterns support this rhythm. Some underground dwellings show signs of repeated use, separated by clean layers of abandonment. Ash cleared. Floors resurfaced. Entrances reopened. These were not forgotten spaces. They were seasonal tools. There is a small detail hidden in these layers. Spring debris differs from winter debris. More plant matter, fewer animal traces, lighter fires. The shift is visible in the soil itself. The ground remembers transitions, even when people do not record them. You feel a strange sadness at the thought of leaving. Underground life is hard, but it is also intimate, familiar. The earth becomes companion as much as shelter. Stepping away feels like breaking a quiet agreement. Some families never fully left. They repurposed underground spaces for storage or shelter during sudden cold snaps. Even in summer, the earth remained useful. Cool spaces preserved food, protected valuables, offered refuge during storms. Others sealed their underground homes permanently when conditions improved, choosing above-ground life once resources allowed. This shift often followed technological changes: better chimneys, improved insulation, thicker walls. Progress crept upward. You realize that underground living persisted longest where alternatives failed. As surface homes improved, the need to retreat into earth diminished, but it never vanished entirely. Harsh winters returned. Famines struck. Old solutions resurfaced. There is debate about whether people viewed underground living as backward once technology advanced. Evidence suggests attitudes varied. Some embraced new methods eagerly. Others retained older practices as insurance. Memory of winter failure lingers longer than optimism. You feel that caution in your bones. Trust in warmth earned underground does not disappear quickly. Even as days lengthen, you glance toward the entrance, measuring air, weighing risk. Children are first to venture out. They test puddles, kick melting snow, return breathless and damp. Adults watch carefully. Joy is tempered with restraint. You notice how underground spaces empty unevenly. Storage remains last. Food stays protected until surface conditions stabilize. The earth continues its work quietly even as people leave. This staggered abandonment reflects winter wisdom. Nothing is rushed. Survival taught patience too well. Some underground homes were deliberately collapsed once vacated, preventing animals or strangers from claiming them. Others were marked subtly, known only to the family, preserved for future need. The ground becomes archive as well as shelter. You think again of how winter compressed life inward. Spring expands it slowly. Underground living teaches respect for transitions. Abrupt change invites danger. This is the 19th lesson winter teaches you. Shelter is not static. It breathes with seasons. It opens and closes as conditions demand. Underground homes were not failures to be escaped. They were tools, used when needed and set aside when not. Their value lay in timing. You stand near the entrance now, feeling warmer air brush your face. It feels unfamiliar, almost too free. You hesitate, then step back inside briefly, savoring the earth's steady embrace one last time. Leaving does not erase gratitude. It deepens it. Outside, birds return. Snow thins. Paths reappear. The world expands again. Underground, silence settles. Waiting, you carry its lessons upward with you. Patience, attention, adaptation. And when winter inevitably returns, you will remember exactly where to go. You notice the tools before you notice anything else. Leaning against walls, hanging from pegs driven into timber, worn smooth by hands that used them season after season. Underground living does not rely on grand inventions. It depends on objects that do one thing well and do it repeatedly without complaint. These tools are quiet collaborators in winter survival. You reach for a wooden shovel, its edge rounded rather than sharp. Metal cuts frozen ground better, but wood flexes without snapping. Both have their place. Medieval families learned which materials suited which task through experience rather than instruction. Tools were chosen not for novelty, but for reliability. Digging underground demanded patience more than strength. Earth had to be loosened carefully, layer by layer. Too aggressive, and walls collapsed. Too cautious, and winter arrived before shelter was ready. The right tool matched the right soil at the right moment. You notice how few tools there actually are. A spade, a pick, a wedge, a mallet. Simplicity mattered. Tools had to be repaired easily, replaced locally, understood by everyone. Specialized equipment had no place here. Winter punished dependence. Materials mattered just as much. Timber for support beams, wattle for wall lining, clay for ceiling, straw for insulation. Each element played a role, none sufficient alone. Underground homes were not built from a single solution, but from layered ones. You press your hand against a wall and feel the rough texture where straw fibers poke through clay. This mixture traps air, slows moisture, and flexes slightly under pressure. It appears again and again in underground structures across regions, a quiet testament to its effectiveness. There is an odd satisfaction in using materials that come from nearby. Earth from beneath your feet, wood from nearby trees, straw from last harvest. Underground living ties shelter directly to landscape. There is no illusion of separation. You imagine the process unfolding over weeks, Digging first, then lining, then reinforcing, then sealing. Each step waiting for the last to prove itself. Rushing meant failure. Winter rewarded thoroughness. You notice how beams are set, not perfectly straight, but slightly angled, distributing weight more evenly. This detail appears repeatedly in excavated dwellings. Builders learned how earth shifts under frost. Straight lines crack, angles adapt. Some underground homes included removable elements, panels that could be replaced when rot set in, supports that could be adjusted as soil settled. This flexibility extended the life of the structure. Nothing was assumed permanent. You feel the presence of improvisation everywhere. A broken pot becomes a drainage channel. A cracked board becomes a brace. Waste is repurposed because replacement costs time and warmth. There is a small but revealing detail in toolware. Many handles are polished smooth only where hands gripped them most often during winter months. Summer tools show different wear patterns. Underground living shaped not just architecture, but the tools themselves. You notice how tools are stored close at hand. Digging does not end once the home is complete. Walls shift. Moisture creeps. Repairs are constant. Tools remain accessible because problems rarely announce themselves in advance. Some historians suggest underground living accelerated technological refinement at a local level. People modified tools incrementally, adjusting length, weight, grip based on winter experience. Innovation happened quietly, without fanfare. You test a wooden peg set into a beam. It holds firm. Metal nails exist, but wood-on-wood joints flex more gently under cold stress. Builders learned which connections survived frost best. There is debate about how standardized these methods were. Evidence suggests broad similarities paired with local variation. People copied what worked nearby, adjusting details based on soil, climate, and available materials. You sit back and look around the space again, seeing it now as an assembly of choices rather than a single structure. Each material answers a question Winter asked: how to stay warm, how to stay dry, how to avoid collapse. Nothing here is decorative. Even small carvings often double as grips or markers. A notch indicates a beam's age. A scratch marks a repair date. Memory is carved into structure. You realize how much knowledge is embedded in this space. Not written, not formalized, but present. A kind of practical literacy passed through hands rather than words. Children learn this literacy early. They watch repairs. They handle tools. They understand which materials matter. Underground living turns construction into ongoing education. You feel a quiet respect for this system. It does not rely on mastery. It relies on attention, on noticing small changes and responding before they grow. This is the 20th lesson Winter teaches you. Survival is engineered, but not engineered grandly. It is built from humble tools used thoughtfully, materials chosen carefully, and repairs made without delay. Underground living endures because it can be maintained by ordinary people using ordinary means. You run your fingers along a beam one last time, feeling grooves worn smooth by countless winters. The wood holds. The earth presses gently back. Outside, storms come and go. Down here, tools wait patiently, ready to answer winter again when needed. And in that readiness, you find a kind of quiet confidence. Not hope, not bravado, just preparedness. In medieval winter, that is enough. You feel it before anyone names it. A tightening in the air when darkness falls. A pause in conversation when the fire crackles too sharply. Underground spaces invite stories the way shadows invite imagination. And winter gives those stories room to grow. Fear does not disappear underground. It changes shape. When you live so close to the earth, surrounded by darkness and silence, the mind fills gaps eagerly. Sounds take on meaning. A settling beam becomes a footstep. A drip becomes a whisper. Winter stretches nights long enough for thoughts to wander where daylight never lets them go. You hear someone mention it softly, a warning passed down. a rule you are not meant to question. Certain spots are avoided. Certain actions are discouraged after dark. These are not written laws. They are habits shaped by experience and fear blended together. Stories grow naturally in this environment. They explain what cannot be controlled. They give shape to anxiety. Underground living magnifies this process. When you cannot see beyond a few feet, imagination supplies the rest. You learn quickly which tales are meant to scare children into caution and which carry practical lessons. Do not dig too deep. Do not block vents. Do not sleep too close to damp walls. Wrapped in myth, these warnings stick. There is a small but persistent pattern in winter folklore. The earth is often portrayed as both protector and threat. It shelters you, but it can also swallow you. Cave-ins haunt the imagination even when they rarely happen. Respect for soil becomes moral as much as practical. You notice symbols scratched into walls near entrances. Not decoration, protection. Marks believed to ward off misfortune, spirits, or simple bad luck. Whether you believe in them matters less than what they do. They calm nerves. They reassure. Some underground homes kept certain rituals strictly. Fires were never fully extinguished. Entrances were checked repeatedly at night. Silence was respected during storms. These habits blur the line between superstition and safety. You feel the comfort these routines bring. Predictability pushes back fear. Rituals create a sense of control when nature offers none. Children listen wide-eyed to winter stories told by firelight. Tales of things that wander above ground when snow falls thick. Of noises that mean danger. Of clever ancestors who survived by listening carefully. Fear and instruction blend seamlessly. Adults pretend not to believe everything they repeat. Yet they follow the rules all the same. Belief is not the point. Survival is. Some scholars suggest that underground living intensified belief in earthbound spirits or forces. Living beneath the surface blurred boundaries between living space and burial space. Death felt closer. Stories filled that proximity. You think again of religious tension discussed earlier. Underground living challenged symbolism. Superstition stepped in where formal belief hesitated. People layered meaning onto space to make it feel safe. There is no consensus on whether these stories increased anxiety or reduced it. Sitting here, wrapped in warmth and ritual, you feel less afraid. Not more. Stories make the unknown familiar. Familiarity breeds calm. You hear the wind shift above. The sound reaches you muffled, but imagination sharpens it briefly. Then it fades. The earth holds. Someone murmurs a familiar phrase. A blessing. A warning. A joke. Laughter follows quietly. Fear loosens its grip. You realize these stories serve another purpose. They fill long hours. They pass time. They bond people together. Underground living compresses social life. Stories expand it again. There is a particular comfort in hearing the same tales repeated each winter. Predictability again. You know how they end. You know who survives. Repetition becomes reassurance. This is the 21st lesson winter teaches you. Fear is inevitable. Meaning is optional. Stories turn fear into something you can hold, shape, and pass on. Underground. Imagination thrives because it has space. Darkness invites it. Silence feeds it. Warmth makes it safe enough to explore. You settle deeper into your bedding as the story winds down. The fire glows steadily. Symbols on walls catch faint light. The room feels protected, layered not just in earth and timber, but in shared belief. Outside, winter remains vast and indifferent. Down here, meaning fills the space winter leaves behind. And as sleep approaches, you find comfort not in certainty, but in familiarity. The stories may not be true, but the warmth is, that is enough to carry you through the night. You think of stone now, of height, of walls meant to impress rather than protect. The contrast arrives gently, almost ironically. While you sit wrapped in earth and warmth, others sleep above ground, beneath banners and battlements. surrounded by thick masonry that looks powerful and feels mercilessly cold. Castles rise. Heat sinks. Stone behaves very differently from soil. It absorbs cold eagerly and releases it slowly, long after fires burn out. In winter, castle walls act like frozen reservoirs, radiating chill inward no matter how much wood is fed to hearths. You can feel this even imagining it, the way cold seeps from surfaces. Not through gaps, but through mass. You picture a great hall at night, fires roaring, tapestries hung thick to disguise drafts, servants adding logs constantly, and still, breath fogs the air. Stone never forgets the cold it collected during the day. Meanwhile, underground, the earth does the opposite. It resists change. It holds yesterday's warmth. It softens tonight's cold. The difference is not subtle. It is decisive. There is a quiet historical irony here. Those with the most resources often slept colder than those with the least. Status built upward. Survival built downward. You imagine nobles bundled in furs, pacing halls to stay warm, while peasants rested below ground in steadier comfort. This reversal rarely appears in paintings or chronicles. Comfort does not photograph well. Power does. Some observers of the period notice this contrast. Letters mention how difficult it was to keep stone dwellings livable in winter. Fires burned constantly. Fuel costs soared. Still, cold persisted. The solution was not to dig down, because prestige did not permit it. Underground living carried stigma for elites. It suggested retreat, humility, practicality over display. Castles existed to be seen. Earth shelters existed to be felt. You feel that distinction now. Underground warmth does not announce itself. It simply exists. Castle cold, by contrast, demands attention. It intrudes. It dominates experience. There is still discussion among historians about whether elites fully understood how inefficient their winter housing was. Evidence suggests they did, but symbolism outweighed comfort. Stone walls projected strength, even when they punished inhabitants. You think again of how winter sorted people not by rank, but by adaptation. Those who accepted Earth's help fared better in the coldest months. Those who insisted on height paid for it nightly. Castles attempted to compensate. Raised wooden floors, wall hangings, smaller sleeping chambers tucked inside larger ones, beds placed away from outer walls. These were partial solutions layered atop an unyielding material. Underground homes solved the problem at its root. They removed exposure rather than decorating it. You feel a quiet satisfaction in that realization. Survival rarely aligns with spectacle. It prefers simplicity. There is an odd echo here. Modern basements feel warmer in winter for the same reason medieval pits did. Earth still behaves the same way. Stone still betrays heat. Time has not changed physics. You imagine winter nights in a castle tower. Wind howling. Stone radiating cold. Servants shivering. Lords restless. Down below, villagers sleep deeper, undisturbed by wind or noise. This contrast sharpens your understanding of underground living. It was not ignorance. It was intelligence expressed without prestige. The earth does not reward ambition. It rewards cooperation. You lean back, feeling the steady temperature around you. The fire burns low, yet warmth remains. That alone tells you everything. This is the 20-second lesson winter teaches you. Power does not guarantee comfort. Knowledge does. Adaptation does. Castles loom in memory and ruin. Underground homes leave subtler traces. Pits, stains, layers of ash and straw, yet those traces represent nights survived. Winters endured. Lives continued. You breathe slowly, imagining the cold stone far above ground. Forgotten in this moment, underground. Winter's reach ends early, and as sleep approaches again, you realize something quietly profound. Warmth does not care how impressive your walls are. It only cares how wisely they are placed. You sense change not as a sudden shift, but as a thinning. Cold still exists, but it no longer feels absolute. Underground. This change arrives late and leaves early. The earth delays everything, including progress. New materials begin to appear above ground. You hear about them before you see them. Chimneys that draw smoke upward more efficiently. Windows fitted with oiled cloth. Then glass, that admit light without surrendering all warmth. Thicker walls packed with insulation rather than empty air. Small improvements, each one shaving a little power from winter. These changes do not arrive everywhere at once. They spread unevenly, following wealth, trade routes, and local skill. Underground living persists longest where innovation arrives last or fails to perform as promised. You feel the hesitation in your own body. Above-ground improvements sound hopeful, but winter has taught caution. Promises mean little until they survive a season. Families test new ideas gradually. A chimney added to one room, a window sealed carefully, a thicker door hung. Underground spaces remain occupied as insurance. No one abandons a working shelter lightly. Archaeological layers reflect this overlap. Underground dwellings coexist with improved surface homes for generations. People move between them, comparing comfort, reliability, and effort. The earth does not surrender its role quickly. You imagine spending nights above ground again, feeling fire smoke lift properly for the first time. Light lingering longer during the day. It feels almost miraculous. And yet, when temperatures plunge suddenly, you still glance toward the earth. Some innovations disappoint. Chimneys crack. Glass shatters. Insulation attracts pests. Winter exposes weaknesses mercilessly. Underground living remains dependable even as surface life experiments. You realize that progress does not replace old solutions immediately. It layers on top of them. People keep what works until something works better consistently. There is no single moment when underground living ends. It fades differently in different places. In some regions, it becomes rare within a century. In others, it persists quietly much longer, especially among those who remember failed winters. You feel gratitude for the earth even as alternatives improve. It does not demand loyalty. It waits patiently, ready to help again when needed. This slow transition reflects winter wisdom. Change cautiously. Test thoroughly. Keep backups. Some families repurpose underground spaces permanently as storage or shelter for emergencies. Others collapse them intentionally, symbolically closing a chapter. Both choices acknowledge the same truth. Underground living served its purpose. You stand near the entrance again, imagining the future above. Taller homes, brighter rooms, smoke rising cleanly into the sky. Winter becoming less oppressive, though never harmless. Yet even as surface life improves, the lessons learned underground linger. Builders remember how insulation matters, how drafts kill warmth, how proximity conserves heat. Underground experience informs above-ground design. This is the 23rd lesson winter teaches you. Progress is gradual. Old knowledge remains valuable even as new solutions emerge. You feel the earth's steady presence beneath your feet one last time. Not as necessity now, but as reassurance. It carried you through when nothing else could. Outside, life begins to stretch upward again. Inside, memory settles downward. Underground living does not disappear. It becomes background knowledge, ready to resurface when winter reminds people of its strength. You take a slow breath, aware that adaptation never truly ends. You stand at the edge of memory now, not your own, but the kind pressed into soil and left there patiently. Long after voices fade and fires go cold, the ground keeps record. Underground living leaves marks that do not shout, but they do endure. Centuries later, someone kneels where you once slept. They brush soil away carefully, trowel scraping softly, uncovering a darkened patch of earth where a hearth once burned. Ash stains spread like shadows frozen in place. Charcoal fragments still smell faintly of fire when warmed by the sun. The earth remembers. Archaeology does not find underground homes all at once. It discovers them slowly, piece by piece. A shallow depression, a ring of post holes, a compacted floor that feels different beneath the foot. To the untrained eye, it looks like nothing. To someone who knows winter, it looks like survival. You imagine that careful hand tracing the outline of your old wall, following its curve, noting how it dips deeper on one side. They understand immediately why. Wind direction, drainage, warmth. The logic is still readable if you know what to look for. Objects emerge next. A broken pot fused with soot. A tool handle worn smooth in one place and nowhere else. Animal bones clustered near a low partition. Each fragment speaks quietly. None of them were meant to last. Together, they tell a story that refused to vanish. Underground homes rarely leave grand ruins. They collapse inward. They soften. They blend back into the landscape. That makes them easy to miss and easy to underestimate. Yet their very subtlety is what allowed them to endure unnoticed for so long. You think about how many winters passed before anyone thought to look closely. How many times plows skimmed over buried floors without knowing. How many footsteps crossed the same ground, unaware of the lives layered beneath. There is something fitting about that. Underground living was never about being seen. It was about lasting. You imagine the archaeologist pausing, brushing dirt from a small groove in the floor, a drainage channel. They smile faintly. Someone planned this. Someone paid attention. Someone cared enough to shape the earth rather than surrender to it. These discoveries challenge old assumptions. For a long time, underground homes were dismissed as primitive or temporary. Excavation changed that view. Patterns emerged. Consistency. Intent. Careful design repeated across regions and centuries. You feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that the choice to live underground left evidence strong enough to be recognized long after the cold nights ended. Survival leaves traces even when glory does not. There is still discussion among researchers about how widespread underground living truly was. Some sites suggest it was common. Others hint it was reserved for extreme conditions. The truth likely shifts from place to place, shaped by climate, resources, and memory of past winters. What is clear is that when winter grew severe, people did not improvise blindly. They returned to methods that had already proven themselves. Archaeology confirms what experience taught. You picture layers of use stacked like seasons, a floor resurfaced, a hearth rebuilt, a post replaced. Each layer marks another winter endured, another decision to stay alive. These layers are humble, but they are powerful. They represent adaptation without drama, knowledge without writing, architecture guided by necessity rather than aesthetics. You think again of castles and stone halls, whose ruins dominate landscapes and histories. Underground homes leave no towers, no walls rising into the sky, yet they preserved lives that castles could not always protect. There is a quiet corrective in that realization. History often remembers what stands tall. Archaeology reminds you to look down. You imagine someone standing in a field centuries later, unaware they are directly above where a family once huddled through a blizzard. The ground appears ordinary. That ordinariness hides extraordinary endurance. This is the 24th lesson winter teaches you. Survival does not always leave monuments. Sometimes it leaves stains, compacted soil, and subtle patterns waiting for someone patient enough to notice. Underground living did not seek remembrance. It sought spring. You breathe slowly, letting that idea settle. Even now, even in memory, the earth holds the story gently, without insistence. And as you drift toward the final moments of this long winter, you understand something deeply comforting. The ground remembers how to help. You return, in your mind, to the very first moment you felt the cold press downward. The instinct to seek warmth did not send you forward or upward. It sent you down. That choice, repeated quietly across centuries, carries a simple logic that winter never managed to overturn. Warmth mattered more than comfort. Survival mattered more than pride. You feel the earth around you again. steady and unassuming. It never promised ease. It offered consistency. Underground living was not pleasant in a modern sense. It was dark. It was smoky. It was crowded. And yet, when winter ruled absolutely, it worked. Families chose Earth because Earth cooperated. It slowed cold. It muted storms. It preserved food. It held heat long after fires dimmed. Above ground, everything leaked. Below ground, things stayed. You think back through everything you have felt here. The hush of snow-filtered silence. The weight of shared bodies. The warmth of animals nearby. The careful balance between fire and air. The constant attention to moisture. None of it was accidental. None of it was romantic. All of it was deliberate. This way of living stripped winter down to something manageable. Not conquered. Managed. You realize now that underground living was never about hiding. It was about aligning with reality. When cold dominated the air, families chose the one place it struggled to reach. They accepted limits rather than fighting them. There is a quiet wisdom in that choice, one that echoes far beyond medieval winters. People often imagine progress as moving upward. Taller homes, thicker walls, more light, more space. Underground living suggests another path, one where lowering yourself brings safety, where reducing exposure increases resilience. You feel the truth of that lesson settle gently. Winter rewarded those who adapted without demanding spectacle. This final understanding comes without drama. No triumph, no defeat, just acceptance. Medieval families lived underground during brutal winters because it worked better than the alternatives available to them. Because earth is a better insulator than stone. Because warmth lasts longer when protected. Because survival favors humility. You take one last slow breath, aware of how calm you feel now. The cold outside still exists, but it no longer commands your attention. The earth holds steady. The fire glows softly. Everyone rests. This is the 25th lesson winter teaches you. Survival does not need to look impressive. It needs to last. You let that thought settle as the night deepens. The fire burns lower now. Its sound gentler, more rhythmic. The air feels balanced. Neither too warm nor too cold. Your breathing slows without effort. There is nothing left to solve tonight. You imagine the earth above you, layered and quiet. Snow resting on top like a final blanket. Storms may still pass, but they no longer reach you with urgency. They are background now, distant and softened. Your body sinks into warmth earned through attention, patience, and shared effort. Muscles loosen, thoughts stretch and fade. The long winter you have traveled through in memory begins to blur at the edges. You are safe here. No decisions are required. No vigilance is needed anymore. The fire has been tended. The walls hold. The night knows what to do without you watching it. You allow your mind to drift, trusting the ground beneath you the way countless families once did. They slept, and they woke, and they lasted. Let the images dim. Let the sounds soften. Let the weight of the earth feel reassuring rather than heavy. Winter can wait outside. Here, underground. You rest. Sweet dreams.